Welcome everyone to Sister Wives with Mary Jane K. Today, I'll be giving my commentary on Sister Wives, Season 17, Episode 1, It's Over. I want to remind everyone that Christine's digital cooking show, Cooking with Just Christine, is available on TLC's website and their Insta page. And new episodes premiere every Sunday as well. So if anyone is interested in supporting Christine, please check that out. The show opens with the previously on segment with key moments from the previous season. They show a clip of Cody and Christine's talk when Cody told Christine his biggest concern was how they will go forward. Cody tells Christine they can't keep living like this. And Christine lets Cody know the whole COVID quarantine is his decision. Cody insists they all agree to this, and Christine tells Cody he has a nanny over all the time. And it cuts to Christine asking that famous question, what does the nanny do? Next, Cody is over at Janelle's, and he tells her it makes him realize that in plural marriage, he doesn't matter. It's the same scene where later on, Janelle is raking leaves and Cody tries to manipulate her into kicking their boys out. Cody announces he is not the head of this family, and that is not the deal they made when they got married. Mary is in the forest in the next flashback scene. She says if she quits, it's not going to get better. Mary says it's lonely, but she isn't giving up on her relationship with Cody. Mary tells viewers she lives alone. Next up is the scene where Cody distributes the nanny's rules to his wives. Janelle asks, wow, are these the rules you guys follow at your house? She's very taken aback, of course. Robyn announces that she is just going to say it. She knows everybody is like suspicious of her, and she pleads, but just please stop. Cody says, these are what she follows. And Cody says angrily in confessional, my kids are blaming Robyn for making the rules, as if it's ludicrous for them to think that. Next, Garrison, Savannah, Gabe, and Janelle are outside talking about the holidays. And Gabe says, frustratedly, that it's been 8 months since he's been able to hang out with his dad. Janelle is frustrated. She is at her wit's end with this whole bullshit stuff. There is also a flashback to Janelle explaining that Garrison started feeling really crappy. And the next day, Gabe did as well. So they both went and got tested for COVID, and they were positive for the Rona, unfortunately. Janelle hopes that she escaped it, but she just took a test and she says, we're gonna know soon. Next is the flashback where Christine explains to cameras that Cody said he didn't want an intimate marriage anymore, and she isn't okay with staying in a marriage where there is no intimacy. Cody says the weirdest thing has just happened, and he guesses that he's been moved out of the house. Personally, he doesn't know what to think about this, as he is sitting in the garage, noticing all his crap packed up outside in labeled boxes in Christine's garage, but he doesn't know what to think about it. The opening scene is some unsettling, ominous music with a notice that states that the Browns shot their own COVID footage. It's very doom and gloom, like a true crime documentary opening, as Cody is seated alone on Coyote Pass. His sunglasses are keeping his hair out of his face, and the top of his head is bent towards the camera, so you can see very clearly a U-shaped patch of hair and nothing on the left and right side at the front of his head. It's the weirdest hairline I have ever seen. And using his sunglasses to keep his hair out of his eyes really highlights that. Why not just cut it? Men go bald all the time. This isn't a good look. Cody is writing on a legal pad with a big book in front of him as ominous dark music plays. Christine says in confessional that things between herself and Cody have been hard for a long time. Months ago, they had a conversation, and Cody made it blatantly clear that he wasn't attracted to her anymore and that they weren't going to have an intimate marriage anymore. Christine says they didn't touch, they didn't hold hands, they didn't even hug. Nothing, not a shred of affection in their marriage. They hadn't done any affection for such a long time. So Christine told Cody not to stay in her room anymore. She didn't want him there anymore in her space. Cody says in self-shot footage that Christine dropped a bomb on him. She said she didn't want him to stay in her room anymore. Cody says Christine said her room was a special place to her and nothing special happens there for them. Cody scoffs. He told her that there are people who have marriages like this. There are lots of people who live like this, in fact, in marriages that are romance-free marriages, sexless marriages, loveless marriages. Christine says it felt really good to tell Cody not to come over. Christine didn't know how wonderful it was to claim her room. Cody explains next that the weirdest thing just happened. He came to the garage and all of his stuff is boxed up in the garage. He found that Christine had moved all of his stuff from their bedroom into the garage. She packed it up, she put it in boxes, she labeled it, and in the garage it went. Cody says during the scene when he found his shit packed that he is a little frustrated by this. He asks, "Why? What is going on here?" as if he's clueless. Cody says the last year they have been in this COVID experience that has brought them to this point where the family started to dissolve over COVID. It's not really over COVID, it's over Cody's behavior, but okay. They flash back to Janelle getting her rule list at the meeting, saying some of the rules were great, but she questions, clean mail with alcohol wipes? And Cody tells Janelle she can mock it or she can find a way. Robyn in confessional has an interesting outfit choice. She has a cheapo plastic beaded necklace and a cheetah print eggplant colored top with a weird scalloped v-neck because she is daring and sassy in this episode. She says she thinks the pandemic is exposing the cracks in their family. We see a flashback of Cody in a ridiculous sun visor carrying a huge metal stake, frustratedly telling his kids, Gabe and Garrison, they have rules and regulation for work, and he asks, why can't we have that for our family staying healthy? Garrison says because they're a family. He asks, why don't we just verbalize it and trust each other? Cody points at Garrison and very smugly answers, therein lies the problem, right there. Robyn, back in confessional, says this has all been very, very hard on Cody. What about how hard it was on his wives and kids with the way Cody manipulated, with the way Cody was verbally and emotionally abusive, deflecting and blaming all his wives and kids for why he was a shit father and husband? What about how hard it was for Isabel in particular, not having her father there for a major surgery that should be an obvious given for any father to be at? Cody is the one choosing to behave like a dick. And Cody is the one who insisted on all or nothing about these rules. Of the nannies, by the way, that he claims he got from his so-called doctor. Cody is making the choice to not be there. And now it's all about ego because Cody will feel like he lost if he were to cave in. And his ego is already bent out of shape. Because when he leveraged himself and his time and presence as a father and a husband to force compliance, most of his wives and kids told him to go fuck off, as they should have. So this is only hard for Cody because Cody is making the choice to make it this hard on himself. Cody created this whole situation with his ego and being so rigid, refusing to compromise. Cody chose not to be around if the wives and kids did not submit to be dictated to, if they refused to be held hostage in their own homes, being told how to live and being controlled, having to jump through hoops, just so Cody can show up for a few hours and act like he did not want to be there in the first place, while also making everyone around him walk on eggshells. This is hard on Cody's other wives and kids. This is not hard on Cody. Cody is making the choice to make this hard for himself and for everyone else. He is being so rigid and uncompromising. intentionally because he says everyone in the family are his obstacles to his goals in life, and he prefers living monogamy with Robyn. So in my opinion, Cody created a situation to facilitate that. He tried to create a situation that might justify himself not giving equal time and not being fair as a father and a husband. Because in Cody's mind, this is all justifiable, and he thinks he's finding a way to justifiably live the way he wants. Robyn says this has all been so hard on Cody, and so it makes him very hard to live with. Next, Cody tells Christine he doesn't know what to tell her or how to work this out during the scene where Christine and Cody meet on Coyote Pass in order to discuss how Cody stabbed her in the back by supporting a move to Utah in private with her and then abandoning Christine when she pitched this to the group. And then he behaved like maybe Christine is an irrational nut because 1 second she was happy and the next she is overreacting and being very emotional. Cody claimed he just couldn't understand Christine's overreaction at that meeting over Utah, when later Cody admitted that he supported the move to Utah in private with Christine, and Christine expected Cody's support when she pitched it to the group. And instead, Cody was the loudest voice of opposition to a move to Utah in the group setting. Cody wants to explain all the other wives don't want to move, and he wants to convince Christine that Flagstaff is great, that she could be happy there. Cody tells Christine in this scene that he doesn't know what to do, and Christine has her hand on her face, and she says this isn't a safe conversation anymore, and she walks away from Cody, telling him she isn't going to talk to him. Next, Mary is in confessional. She has a very interesting outfit on. She has a pleather royal blue jacket on with a leopard print top with some beading at the top. Rawr. Robyn has the cheetah print. Mary has the leopard print. These two are really showing off their sassy side this season. Mary says she knows that Cody and Christine have their challenges in their relationship, especially this past year with COVID and disagreeing on how to handle it. They flash back to the conversation between Cody and Christine after Isabel's surgery. Cody tells Christine he feels slighted. She tells Kotex hanging out with you isn't enough for her girls. And Cody says either way they aren't jiving and he is out of the house. Ominous music plays as we go to Robyn's house. Cody wants to talk with Robyn about what's going on at Christine's house, because Robyn has a nature of understanding relationships and how to make them work. Okay, so again, let's remember the honeymoon special when Robyn tells Cody he has to man up. And Cody says, we, meaning he and Robyn, have decided to give them, his other wives, some of what they want. Now, Cody from day one has crossed a line with Robyn in allowing her to have all the private information on his other individual marriage, sharing the problems he has with other wives in his private marriages with them, with Robyn. And Robyn, the empath, advises Cody on how to manipulate his wives, how to communicate, what the wife may feel, what she needs to hear, what crumbs Cody gives who. Robyn is the bird chirping in Cody's ear, helping him try to string them along to keep them in, probably for the TLC paycheck, in my opinion. They did this from day one together, as Cody gabs about his marital issues and Robyn advises him, and we know she advises Cody, by the way, because look how she advised him to call on the honeymoon and what to say when his preference was to delay calling his wives at all. And look how Robyn directs Cody with Mary, for example, to make the s'more. She tells Mary things like, there is hope, there's an open door. When Mary tells her, Cody just made it clear they will always only ever be friends. Robyn mentioned to Mary at that point that Cody says he should call her sometimes, that he mentions to Robyn, oh, maybe I should call Mary, maybe I should stop by. He says he should, but he doesn't actually follow through. Robyn thinks she can act as an aid to help Cody manipulate the wives to keep them in my opinion. Look at what happened with the Utah move. Christine asked Cody what each wife said regarding the move. And Cody told her he would rather not tell her what each sister wife said because Robyn advised him earlier on not to mention that the sister wives rejected her idea or what each sister wife said. And whipped Cody followed Robyn's directive. So this Cody going to Robyn for advice is just a way for Cody and Robyn to help Cody manage everyone else. It's always been we, Cody and Robyn, against them, his wives. We will give them some of what they want. And now teammate Robyn will advise Cody on how to fix things under the guise of her loving nature, her empathic skills. Cody comes in as Robyn is seated on the couch, pretending to write very pensively. He walks in and Robyn asks him what he is up to, and he is going over to Christine's house. Cody tells Robyn he has to go over to have a conversation. Robyn allows it. She says, okay, and she asks Cody if everything is okay, and Cody says no. Cody tells Robyn Christine told him she needed to talk to him. She followed him out to his truck, and she told him she didn't want him staying there anymore. At this, Robyn raises her eyebrows and she glares as Cody explains he was dumbfounded and almost slack-jawed when he heard the news. He didn't know what that even meant. Cody goes on that the other day he was in the garage getting stuff for Gabe while Christine was out of town, and he noticed that all of his stuff was out of Christine's room, packed in boxes in the garage. Robyn raises her eyebrows more, but they won't move as she tilts her head sideways in absolute shock. I think Robyn got Botox, and people always look constipated when they overdo it and they can't express emotion no matter how much they strain to try. A couple lines look a lot better than the Botox look, in my opinion. Robyn explains she was just shocked. Cody is heading to Christine's because she's home now, so he wants to ask her why she moved him out. Robyn just says, wow, wide-eyed. She has no idea what to say. She suggests to Cody that maybe he should just try to stay on Christine's couch for a while. Maybe it's just a phase, Robyn thinks. Frankly, I'm 100% sure Christine would not want Cody there. Clearly, if she packed his shit and boxed it and put it in the garage, she's saying she is done. She verbally told him she was done. So that would be like a boundary violation for him to show up and insist on sleeping in the house on her couch. Cody scoffs at that suggestion that he would sleep on the couch. He asks, why would I sleep on the couch? And Robyn tells Cody it's because that's what you would do when you don't have other houses to go to. No, Christine doesn't want him in her space. That's what a whack job would do. Sleep where they are not welcome, sleep where they are not wanted. Cody tells Robyn they aren't monogamists, so that doesn't count. I think that Robyn knows in monogamy, if a guy was only with one wife and he cared to stay married to her, he would sleep on the couch if they had issues and he would try to make it work for a time perhaps. But this isn't a monogamous couple with kids who share a single family home with no other options where the husband can stay, with no other wives' houses where the husband can stay. This isn't just a minor disagreement. And Robyn's advice is wrong. It violates Christine's boundaries. It violates her safety. Christine consciously packed his shit and put it in the garage. Christine said, I do not want you here, verbally to Cody. So in that case, there is no need to sleep on the couch out of a lack of places to go. And the wife, Christine, has told Cody verbally and took action in packing his stuff, putting it outside. That's her boundary. Cody forcing himself to sleep on the couch unwelcomed is almost abusive. It crosses a boundary. It threatens Christine's sense of safety. That's terrible advice from Robyn, and it would make Christine feel unsafe when she clearly set her boundary and she made her preferences crystal clear. If I had a husband verbally and emotionally abuse me and manipulate me, and I was sure I was done, and I packed his stuff, and I verbally alerted him he was to be out, I did not want him there, yet he still showed up to insist on sleeping on my couch, that's abusive behavior. That's unsafe. He is unwelcome. I set my boundary. It's not appropriate for Robyn to suggest that Cody violate Christine's boundary, that Cody violate Christine's safety and peace of mind, the boundary she set in her home. That's horrendous advice. As horrendous as the busy floral top Robyn is wearing in this scene. Robyn says sometimes you just can't sleep in the same bed with your spouse because you are struggling. Foolish Robyn says, maybe Christine just needs a break. And then she trails off. Then she says, but he doesn't need to not be there. She says, I mean, in fact, it should be the other way around. He should be there, present. So Christine packed his shit. She labeled it. She set it out for Cody and she verbally alerted him she did not want him in her house, staying over. And Robyn's empathic advice is ignore what Christine wants, ignore her voice, make her feel for sure she doesn't matter, ignore her boundary, and insist to be there whether you are welcome or not. Take away her safety, ignore her voice, ignore what she wants, stay on that couch. Listen, this isn't a Nicholas Sparks bullshit novel. If someone doesn't want you there and they pack your shit and they label it, it's not a game. They're not playing hard to get. This is not a love game. It's not a phase. They are done. As a woman, knowing how Christine feels, it's very shit advice of Robyn to advise Cody to cross her boundaries and violate her sense of safety. And Robyn supposedly is a sensitive empath who knows how to manipulate relationships to make them work, according to Cody. So he went to Robyn for advice, and she gave him the worst advice anyone could ever give. If Cody is operating at Robyn's direction, following her advice with every marriage, it's no wonder that everything has fallen apart. Maybe Robyn wants to burn it to the ground. Maybe she wants Cody all to herself just as much as he wants her. That love swelling in Robyn's heart for her sister wives and for the family has really vomited all over everything, hasn't it? Robyn advises Cody he has to stay. He has to fix it. He has to figure it out. What la la land is Robyn living in? Fix what? After over a decade of trying, over 25 years of trying, and 6 kids later, and Christine trying hard, year after year, feeling like she was married to the human equivalent of a wall. There is no fixing it. There is nothing there to fix. Cody says he doesn't want to be sexist here, but why does a guy have to sleep on the couch? This man has no balls. He's made of cotton. A light breeze might just tip him over. He is so spineless. A leaf blowing in the wind has more metal than Cody Brown. Maybe the couch is too good for Cody. Maybe Cody should be relegated to the floor, I think. Why does a guy have to sleep on the couch, he says? He says it's his room too. Cody wants to paint the picture like this emasculates him. Like his wife is too liberated, taking all the power. And men should have rights too. Men are victims too, like he wants to start a male Me Too movement. I think Cody is doing this because he wants to spin the narrative that he feels disenfranchised. He feels marginalized by his wives. He's a victim. He can no longer be a man. They don't allow him to be a man. And then he will say the lifestyle has such high expectations that no man can reach them. He can't do it. It's all too much on the man. He is sick of this. He can't do it. Because I think Cody wants to try and paint himself as the victim of his irrational, liberated wives, the victim of polygamy. And if he tries, it's not going to fly with me. Should his wife take the couch? Does a real man, an alpha male, bitch and whine about taking the couch? Do they allow their women to take the couch? If a real man has an argument with his wife, would it be an issue for them to have to take the couch if their wife needs space? Would a real man say, why do I have to take the couch? Should the mother of his kids, should the mother of Cody's 11-year-old daughter, Truly, who she still has to raise and cook for and chauffeur places, should she be taking the couch? Is that how a man acts, complaining about taking the couch? This guy is such a beta. Why does the man get the couch? He sounds like an incel with a neckbeard. He is so weak and spineless. Oh, the couch. Oh, the couch. Why does the man have to take the couch? Oh, this is so unfair for the man. Why does this have to happen for the man? He was too afraid of COVID to go to his daughter's surgery. His fear of an illness that may or may not come, supposedly, stopped him from being a decent dad and a decent human. And now he's suggesting, wondering why the man would get the couch. Why is it always the man? So he would love to relegate Christine to the couch. What a fucking pussy. He asks, why does a man have to sleep on the couch? It's his room too. Not really. It's Christine's house. It's not really his house. He barely even slept there. He even said it feels like it's not his house. It feels like Christine's house. Now he wants to say that it's his house and his room when it's convenient to him. Maybe if it was his house, he would show up there a little more often, no? Maybe if it was his house and he actually showed up there from time to time, he would have known how much pain his daughter was in on a daily basis. Isabel's level of pain seemed to really take him by surprise, as if he didn't know the degree of her pain or that she suffered daily from morning to night throughout her life. He didn't seem to know about her pain. He even suggested that they wait 6 months for the surgery. If that were his house, he would have damn well known about his daughter's pain, right? If he was there, if that's his house. If he showed up there on a regular basis. Cody wasn't even being a man satisfying his wife, probably because he doesn't know how to. He seems pretty obtuse. 4 wives in, and he's probably still wondering where the clit is. He still can't find it. He doesn't know. All of this claiming he's an alpha male, announcing it every chance he gets, making it known. All this wanting to be a leader, but he can't even go to bed and love his wife. He can't even handle it. Most men would be happy they had a wife who wanted them, like, fuck yes, awesome. Not Cody. He seems to dread it. He cut sex off with Mary over a decade ago. We found out last tell-all. Now he did it with Christine. We don't know what he does or doesn't do with Janelle. We do know what he probably does with Robyn. So one has to ask, is Cody angry carrying his ego around, proclaiming he's an alpha, wanting to be a leader to compensate for other areas or insecurities in his life? I don't know, just a thought. Cody tells Robyn he doesn't understand anything, so he is just going over to Christine's to ask her why she moved his boxes. Robyn asks, she didn't tell you why? And Cody tells Robyn he still hasn't talked to Christine. Cody asks, what's the point of staying the night there? He says he has no place to shower. It's the walk of shame. He's ashamed. Christine felt ashamed, I'm sure. When the doctors asked her, where is your husband? And everyone was shocked to learn Cody wasn't there supporting her through this. Christine was ashamed by the cruel Nacho story he told in the book, and by the way he treated her as less than, and the way he treated her like she was dumb, as if she would accept his manipulations, as if she would accept him giving her and her kids less than they deserve as a husband to her and a father to the kids. I'm sure Christine was ashamed of Cody when he was trying to leverage sex in exchange for her modifying her behavior with Robyn. It's embarrassing for Christine to have been married to a guy she can't respect. So if Cody is ashamed by his walk of shame, he can suck it. Robyn tells Cody she wouldn't assume that Christine was telling him not to stay in the house at all. He's not assuming. Christine said this. That's what she said, and that's what she means, and that's what she wants. If I was Christine watching this, I would be so insulted by this conversation Cody and Robyn are having. Robyn suggests to Cody that maybe Christine is just in a weird spot right now. And Cody suggests that maybe he can move back in. He has no idea yet. This is the blind leading the deaf. You see how this advice Cody has gotten from Robyn over the years on how to make his relationships work has actually run them into the ground? Robyn and Cody are both idiots, and like attracts like. Robyn says she feels like there's an unfairness in plural marriage, where if a husband is having a problem with one wife, he is going to somebody else's house, and that wife he is having a problem with is alone. She doesn't have somebody else. Robyn tells Cody if she were him, she would stay in the house. Even if Cody isn't in Christine's room, he should stay in the house and he should sleep on the couch. She says he can get a cot or he can sleep in Truly's room. Bad idea. This is the worst advice ever. When Christine made it very clear as a mature adult what she wants, this would be an insult to her and what she wants, and it crosses her boundaries, and it fucks with her level of comfort and safety in her own home for Cody to be there. What Robyn is suggesting is completely inappropriate. It's completely out of line, in my opinion. This is the last thing a woman in Christine's situation wants. The husband or the boyfriend or the partner showing up when they were asked not to, insisting on sleeping under the same roof. I don't think Robyn gets it, and obviously Cody doesn't get it. Imagine if Robyn was dating a guy and they fought and he wanted her out, he packed up her stuff, he left it outside, and he told her, I don't want you staying here anymore. And she came and she insisted to sleep in the house, unwelcome, not in the room, on the couch, and she refused to leave. She wouldn't leave, and she kept showing up after the boyfriend, the husband, whatever, asked her not to. Stalker much? Psycho much? This is single white female nuts or sleeping with the enemy nuts. This is crazy advice to be giving. Cody says before Christine moved all of his stuff out, he stayed a couple of times until she asked him not to stay in her room. When the kids went to bed and she went to bed, Cody was just left alone, so Cody would just leave. Robyn tells Cody she would plan on staying there even if he is sleeping on the couch. Cody is adamant about this. He says, no, it doesn't work. And Robyn tells Cody, yes, it works. Cody says, no, it doesn't work. Robyn again insists, yes, it does work. And she's getting frustrated. Cody asks, how does that work? And Robyn says, because he is still in the house. And Robyn thinks if Cody is still in the house, Christine might decide to come down and speak to him. She might want to talk to him. Robyn says, maybe this is just a thing where Christine is seeing if Cody will stick it out. Almost like a test, basically. Christine isn't testing Cody. See, just because Cody and Robyn treat this like playing a game and they manipulate and whisper, it doesn't mean that this is how Cody's wives and kids treat the family and the relationships within the family. To Christine, this is her marriage. Cody is the father of her kids. They share 6 kids together. How pathetic does Robyn have to be to suggest maybe this is just a phase, maybe this is just a test? They tried for like 25 years. What the fuck? Just because Cody and Robyn manipulate everyone and they assume everyone is manipulating them, or that everyone is playing the same game for power that they are, when no one else is playing this game other than Cody and Robyn, Christine, Mary, and Janelle are all Team Brown. The only ones treating this as a game of who holds the most power and influence, trying to manipulate everything, are Cody and Robyn. And Cody made it very clear that his wives and his kids are his opponents when he called his family the obstacles to his goals in life. In confessional, Cody says he hates the idea because, first of all, it gives Christine power over where he sleeps. Cody says, Christine has done this, Janelle has tried kicking him out, Robyn has tried kicking him out. Cody says Mary did this all of the time. He says that's a game to him. That's a game he doesn't want to play. That game he isn't going to play. See how Cody projects? See how Cody perceives things? He projects on everyone else in the family. To Cody, this is all a game. This is a game for power. This is about Cody serving himself and trying to get his way everywhere he can. Cody thinks everyone manipulates and everyone calculates, like these relationships are games to have power, as if the wives want to have power over him and they want to have power over each other. Because guess what? Cody sees it as a game himself. So he assumes the way he perceives this, the way he behaves within that perception of this being a game for power, acting in manipulations to try and gain control, or his way, he perceives that this is how all of his wives and kids see this, like a game for power, and that all of them are handling this family dynamic in the same way through manipulation, when Cody is really the only one treating it this way, and Robyn, of course. Cody sees the context of his familial dynamic as a game for power, almost like Game of Thrones or something. This guy is off his rocker, and now he is saying his wives are playing power games with him. His wives are taking his power because Cody wants to paint his wives as operating in the same way that he does, so he can try to paint himself as a victim of all this and as a victim of polygamy, the lifestyle as well, in my opinion. Robyn tells Cody that Christine's house is his home, and Cody says he knows. Robyn is frustrated. She breathes hard and she tells Cody he is freaking her out. Robyn says, if you're not working that something out with somebody else, that's bullcrap. Go back. In confessional, that's what she says. Cody tells Robyn he wishes he wouldn't have told Janelle about this. Robyn is scared to let Cody go to Christine's. She is nervous for Cody to leave, and she's wondering what's going to happen next. Robyn is scared. Cody insists he isn't sleeping on the couch. He refuses to do that. And Robyn says she feels so powerless. Wow. Robyn mentioned feeling powerless. Cody mentioned he thinks that if he were to sleep on the couch, he would be giving Christine power over where he sleeps. Everything is about power with Cody and Robyn, you see? Right off the bat, it's about power. I didn't hear one word about Cody taking accountability with Christine or respecting her wishes. Instead, Robyn and Cody mentioned power. Cody mentioned Christine was taking the power over where he slept. It's his bed too. And he mentioned that this is a game his wives play, kicking him out. He thinks his wives are kicking him out for power because he does everything according to power. Everything is calculating to get his way. But his wives don't operate that way. His wives just want a decent husband and a father who is normal and stable and self-aware. It's not about power for them. They just want to feel like they matter to Cody, that he is invested in them, that he views them as his equals, that he accepts them and that he loves them unconditionally as they are. They don't want power. They want a good, decent husband and a good, decent father for their kids. When his wives kick him out, it's not a game to leverage power for them. It's not a manipulation tactic. They are just tired of being married to the human equivalent of a brick wall. This is not a game for them. It's not about power. They are frustrated. They know with Cody, the lights are on and nobody's home and ain't nobody ever gonna be home. Robyn says she feels powerless, and she says this is something that could affect all of their lives, and if they don't somehow figure this out, it will. Over at Janelle's, we find out that Janelle is positive for COVID. She says she lived a whole year, 9 months, thinking about what happens if she were to get COVID. She says as much care as they've been taking with the boys here at home, keeping them separated, Janelle was exposed when everybody else was in the family. Basically, she's hinting, meaning at Robyn's house, through the nanny, everyone got exposed to COVID. Janelle feels like she has a bit of a bad cough. She's achy, she's tired, but she hopes that's where it all stops and that's all that happens. I hope Janelle had a very speedy recovery. She seems very healthy. I think she probably will do just fine. I know for sure she won't be doom and gloom and treat it like it's the end of the world the way Cody would. My goodness, if Cody got COVID, he would be in bed moaning and wailing, telling his kids, I might die, I'm gonna die, being overdramatic, Look how Janelle sucked it up and behaved like a woman, and I'm sure Gabe and Garrison took it like men. I can't even imagine what Cody would be like when he's sick, my God. He seems like the kind of guy that would play the victim and want a lot of sympathy and act like the world is ending instead of taking it like a man, but that's just my opinion. In confessional, Cody says he just found out that Janelle and Savannah have COVID-19. They're staying home. The whole house is quarantined right now. And Cody doesn't know what to expect. Janelle is a bit worried. She considers herself healthy, but she isn't as healthy as she could be. Janelle is hoping her symptoms are just like the boys and that it doesn't progress past the bad cold stage. So Janelle is really stuck at home now. Poor Janelle. I sincerely hope that she recovered quickly. I like Janelle a lot. I think she is smart. She's very intelligent, and I admire that. She's very practical. She's very pretty. She has an amazing business mind, amazing intellect. And I really especially admire her work ethic. I think she's a badass woman. And I think if she can handle years of her life with Cody, she can surely kick COVID's ass, no doubt. Cody is complaining in confessional that he is dealing with this stuff. And it's like his life is just this big unknown. Cody asks, how will Janelle and Savannah fare with COVID-19, an unknown? He asks, what's going on with Christine and I even? He says that's an unknown. He says it's very stressful to live in a world where you don't understand what's going on in your life or what's going on around you. It's just unknowns, unknowns, unknowns. It's interesting that Cody says it's stressful to live in a world where you don't know what's going on around you. It's just unknowns, he says. I wonder if Cody ever wonders how stressful it was for his wives and kids during the pandemic. They stressed out. It was a time of huge unknowns. It was a time of uncertainty for the whole world. It was stressful. It was scary. And Cody added to their burden and their anxiety and fear by the way he tried to dictate his COVID protocols and the way he was so all or nothing, leveraging his love and investment and commitment and emotions and time and his presence as a father and a husband, saying, live as I dictate or I won't be here at all or nothing, your choice, no compromises. Does Cody understand that his kids needed their father and that his wives could have used a stable and with it mentally well present husband to be their rock during a time like this? And instead, Cody used this scary time as an opportunity to take the easy way for himself, to live monogamy. He used his protocols as an excuse to not be there as a husband and a father. Does Cody understand the stress all of this caused to his family? Does Cody understand that they were all living with a lot of unknowns in a very scary world and that he added more unknowns to it by acting like a nut, by not being their constant, by not giving fair and equal time to everyone to help give them stability and support through this difficult time, that his behavior and his absence as a father and a husband stressed them out in a time of unknowns even more? No, Cody only sees his own stress, his own fear of the unknown. He doesn't think about anyone else's feelings. He puts himself first. Does Cody get how he made the choice to use his nanny's protocols as an excuse to not be a decent man or a father, and he used that as a reason to justify not showing up as a husband and a father for his wives and kids when they needed him as a constant, when they needed his stability during an uncertain time, the stress that caused to them? And instead, Cody blamed them as the reason why he could not be present, why he could not be fair, why he could not give equal time, why he could not give investment to them. Imagine their stress. Imagine their uncertainty. They couldn't count on the supposed leader of their family who unraveled and behaved like a spineless coward hiding out at Robyn's house during the pandemic rather than living up to what a decent husband and a father would do. Does Cody think of the stress on his wives and kids that all of this caused with his behavior? Does Cody see the stress he caused by the damage he created in the family with his protocols? Does he see that his mode of operation did more damage to the family's well-being, and it created a hell of a lot more stress than them actually surviving COVID. Cody has no right to complain about his stress. My advice to Cody would be take a fucking marital, princess. Does Cody understand the extra difficulty and the stress Isabel had to endure when her dad chose not to attend her surgery? She not only had to endure the physical pain and the stress and the fear of major surgery during a pandemic, but she also had to wrap her brain around her dad not being there with her. She sobbed, wondering why she wasn't her dad's priority, why she did not matter enough for him to be there like any other decent father would. That caused her stress, and it made it more difficult for Isabel because along with the physical pain, she had to contend with the emotional stress of processing that she did not matter enough to her dad for him to be there. What about that stress? Let alone Christine's stress. Christine had to handle Isabel's recovery alone. We should not be hearing one iota about Cody's stress when Cody wants to take accountability for the stress he put on all of his kids and on all of his wives, and particularly on Isabel. When Cody wants to own up to the fact that when his family needed him the most, when they did not know what was happening around them at the height of the pandemic, Cody wasn't there. And not only did he not go with Isabel, he initially stressed her at the height of the pandemic when she was in severe pain every day. Cody's initial suggestion to Isabel was that she fly alone to New Jersey as a minor to do major required surgery by herself. And Christine, as her mom, had to reassure her, there is no way in hell you would ever go alone. Does Cody understand the stress of that on his daughter who was in pain and how ludicrous that suggestion was, how much more stress that created, how thoughtless that was? Cody caused a lot of stress to all of his family in a world where no one knew what was happening around them. Then, when he chose the pandemic to play act at being Kim Jong-un, switching to full dick mode, dictator mode, and emotionally and verbally abusing anyone who refused to bend the knee. Does Cody understand all the stress he caused directly to his family? What a feckless, foolish man. When Cody wants to account for the stress he causes with his warped mind and his shit behavior, then we can all sit and have a tea party to hear about his stress. Goldilocks will look great in one of Hannah's hats. Maybe even a fascinator. I'll make the crumpets for the tea party. Cody only sees himself and his stress. He never thinks of the havoc he wreaks on others, the aggravation, the turmoil he creates. But yet he wants to talk about his stress. In confessional, Cody explains that he's headed over to Christine's house now, and he's essentially going into the unknown. Cody has so many emotions. He says, like he's ambivalent, but he's galled by it. He's like, how dare Christine move his stuff out of his house? Cody wants to know what Christine is thinking now because they aren't communicating. Christine says she really doesn't want Cody in her room. It's gotten to the point where his presence just gives her anxiety. I just want to take a minute to explain a little of what Christine might be feeling here. When you live in a space with the type of person like Cody, someone controlling, someone domineering, someone resentful, someone angry and cruel who is manipulative emotionally and verbally, or any type of abusive emotionally, verbally, or otherwise, when you live with that type of a person, a real asshole with narcissistic tendencies, with a big ego and very low self-esteem on the inside, who wants to dominate everyone, who treats everyone like they are superior than them, who is very cold, who can only love conditionally, where you have to walk on eggshells and you live in tension and you live in stress, where you know that if you bother to speak up, it's like talking to a wall. You don't count. You know that you aren't that person's equal. You aren't seen and you are treated as less than, like you don't matter, like your voice doesn't count, like you are incapable. It's very dehumanizing and it's very cruel. And you get to a place where it feels like you are being suffocated every day. And you get to a point where even if things are going okay, the other person's presence feels like a ton of bricks hit you. in the gut, and you feel anxious, you feel nervous, and you feel stressed, almost like you drank poison, because your body is telling you this person is bad for you, you aren't safe. And if you feel that way just by seeing a person, to see them is very difficult. It takes everything in you to be able to tolerate it, especially when you know that you are done. And it doesn't have to even be a marriage relationship. This could be with your parents, with your siblings, with your boyfriends or girlfriends, with your friends. It doesn't only happen in romantic relationships. So what Christine is doing, having to sit with Cody, having to sit across from him, having to do this and on camera, understand that this is empowering for her in the end, in a sense, but it's also not easy for her, and it doesn't feel good physically or emotionally. She probably dreads this as it's happening, and she knows it's not going to mean anything. Cody isn't going to get it no matter what they talk about, no matter what it transpires between them, what they say. It will just be more of the same. She knows she's talking to a wall before he even arrives. And I'm sure she knows how she's going to be treated and that it's not going to be good. Cody tells Christine that he noticed that she moved him into the garage. And Christine says, yeah. And Cody asks why she moved him out. And Christine tells him for a lot of reasons. She says it was hard having his stuff there. Christine says it was really hard. And she tells Cody once he said he wasn't attracted to her and he didn't want to have a further intimate marriage with her, she didn't. And Cody cuts her off here. He tells Christine that that wasn't called for as far as where they were at. Cody tells Christine when she told him not to stay with her anymore, he was dumbfounded by it. It was a jaw dropper. Cody says he thought, whoa, okay. I have to say, during their conversation, the camera focuses on Cody's profile, and he has a huge bald spot for inches and inches that you can see just on the side of his head. And I was super distracted by it. It's like a few strands of one single solitary curl, and then a 4-inch patch or so that's just clear skin, and then there's hair. Why not just shave it? It looks literally like he was injured on the side of his head, and they focus on it a lot on camera. It's very distracting. Christine asks Cody, why do you think I could do that? She says she can't have a marriage that's not an intimate marriage. It's not fair. And Cody says he didn't tell her that he wasn't going to be intimate with her. And Christine says he did say that from the car. And Cody insists, no, he didn't. Christine says they had this conversation months ago about what their marriage looked like in the future, and it was terrible. They play the flashback of Christine explaining what happened between herself and Cody, where she records herself and she explains that she asked Cody, so you don't want us to have an intimate marriage? And Cody said no. And Christine said that wasn't enough for her. She can't have no intimacy in her marriage. And Cody told her people do it all the time. In fact, he knows couples that don't have intimate marriages. Back in the present, in confessional, Christine says, Cody made it very blatantly clear that he didn't see their relationship ever changing. He didn't see them ever having an intimate marriage again. And Christine says she never signed up for a marriage like that. She says if Cody doesn't want to have a real marriage with her, she doesn't want him in her bed. Christine tells Cody she asked him that night if it was over, if the intimate part of their marriage was over. And Cody said it was over. Cody disagrees. He says no, he didn't say that. He just shrugged his shoulders. Look, even if Cody just shrugged his shoulders, who wants to be with a man who isn't eager to have sex with them, who isn't eager to have intimacy and closeness and affection with them? Who wants to be with a partner when you ask as a wife, you ask them, will we ever be intimate again? And they respond with a shoulder shrug, an indifferent and cold shoulder shrug, who is always just phoning it in, who has zero passion for you. What wife would that be enough for? What woman in the world would accept that? A partner with zero passion for you. Even if Cody did have sex with Christine, at this point it would be humiliating. It would be an insult because Cody wouldn't feel attracted to her. And Christine also wouldn't feel wanted by Cody. It's not just about the act of sex. This is about closeness and connection and affection and vulnerability. Christine deserves something more than being married to the wall. She deserves someone who is enthusiastic about her, who appreciates her, who loves her as she is. Someone who knows how to love unconditionally and how to appreciate her. Cody only knows how to love conditionally, in my opinion. He isn't a very passionate man. He's more of the resentful coward type. Cody insists that he just shrugged his shoulders, but he didn't tell her it was over. Christine says Cody told her that he wasn't attracted to her and that they would not have an intimate marriage. Cody sighs heavily. Now it's all getting too inconvenient for Cody because, as we know, Cody is incredibly emotionally lazy. So this is all too much. He's really being put out with all of this. Cody tells Christine he didn't use these words at all. He never said that. Of course, Cody will try to gaslight Christine. He will make her seem crazy. He will make her seem irrational. He will deny doing things, all the things that he knows he did. He will deny saying all the things that he actually said. Cody will say, Christine misperceived him. That's not what happened. He will try to make Christine doubt what she has actually experienced. He insists. He shrugged his shoulders and he said, we will see. Christine says, Cody has used those words enough about her for her to know. And he has told her many times that he was not attracted to her. One example of Cody saying Christine is unattractive to him, since he says that never happened, comes from the page turner Becoming Sister Wives, the famous nacho incident. I will now read an excerpt of that because I want to be clear that Cody has written in their memoir, Becoming Sister Wives, that Christine was unattractive to him. Cody writes, when we set out on our road trip, I was convinced that Christine was the cutest girl in the world, although she was a little chubby. Back then, I was young and superficial enough to care about physical appearances. After we'd been on the road all night, we stopped at a gas station. I'd been drinking soda pop to stay awake, and my stomach felt sour and upset. Just thinking about food made me queasy. Christine went into the Quickie Mart and bought herself what seemed to look like the largest portion of chili cheese nachos that I'd ever seen. The sight of those nachos turned my stomach. I couldn't watch her eat them. She must have been starving because she was eating so quickly, and there was chili sauce and nacho cheese everywhere. Looking back, I hate myself for the thoughts I had at that moment. But the sight of this chubby girl in my car devouring chili cheese nachos for breakfast put the brakes on our relationship. It brought out the most superficial and the shallowest side of me. I still liked her. In fact, I liked her very much. But the nacho experience cooled my attraction. A little. Well, a lot. So that not only shows Cody's cruelty and his character that he would write that in a book, but it also is clear evidence of Cody calling Christine unattractive to him for the world to see, and she is the mother of his kids. And we also don't know how many other times Cody has said this in private. But of all of Cody's wives, not that beauty should have any bearing on anything in my opinion, but I have to say, Christine ages the best and she looks beautiful and vibrant. And as soon as she left Cody, she looked lighter and stress-free and even more bright. She is gorgeous. She's a nurturer. She has an amazing inner strength. She has an amazing personality. She's pretty on the inside and the outside. So I don't know what the problem is, but it's not with Christine. It's obviously with Cody. And to be honest, Cody seems to have some type of an aversion to sex. He stopped intimacy with Mary. He tried to do this with Christine. And most men would be super happy that their wife wanted intimacy. It's weird. Maybe the big ego really is a compensation for all the small things. Who knows? Cody insists that he didn't use the words. Christine thinks that he did use the words. He did. I mean, I'm sure of it. And I think he wants to make Christine doubt herself when he says he doesn't do things. That is just a manipulative tactic. She knows because she is looking at Cody like WTF. Cody says he doesn't want to get confrontational here. In confessional, he says Christine had been telling family members that she was wanting to leave him. Cody says it was a year or so ago that she started, and she's been telling everybody she wants to leave, but she's never told him. She never talked to him about it. So when she asks him if they are ever going to be intimate, he is hearing rumors from everybody that she has been threatening to leave, and she hasn't been talking to him. So Cody says he shrugs his shoulders because he isn't going to be fooling around with a woman who is talking about leaving him. In confessional, Christine looks absolutely shocked. She takes a deep breath and she says, Cody didn't just shrug his shoulders. She asks, can you imagine? It was one of the most humiliating experiences of her life. She doesn't want to be married to a guy who is just going to shrug his shoulders when she is asking him if they are ever going to have an intimate marriage. Christine mimics Cody. She shrugs her shoulders and says what he said to her when she asked about intimacy. He said, I don't know. I guess that entirely depends on you. That's what Cody told her, and she mimics him shrugging his shoulders and delivering this. And she says, well, go fuck that in confessional. That's her response. Christine tells Cody she just thinks they both need to be free of each other. Christine tells Kotex she is just ready to be free. Cody rolls his eyes and he looks away, dismissing her. Christine tells Cody it was bad before COVID. She tells him it's been 10 or 12 years of bad. Cody denies it. He says, no, it hasn't been 10 or 12 years of bad. And Christine tells Cody, well, for him, it's been longer. And Cody gets frustrated. He says, oh, for you, it's been longer because you are the one that unraveled this whole thing on me. Cody tells Christine he thought all of Lehigh was a beautiful experience, a blessing, everything. And Christine told him that it wasn't. Christine asks Cody, what happened in Lehigh that was really difficult? She asks Cody, do you remember? Cody is silent, so Christine tells Cody. She asked him for help, and he said no. In confessional, Christine says where she and Cody's marriage started to disintegrate is when she was pregnant with Truly. They flash back to the first episode of Sister Wives, the episode where Cody introduces a very pregnant Christine to viewers with Truly still cooking before her birth in the year 2010 back in Lehigh. Christine says she was overwhelmed with everything. She still had to produce some sort of income, so she was working at night after having to caregive and do chores and homeschool while pregnant and also doing all of the household shopping and cooking and cleaning. Imagine doing all of this while pregnant and raising your kids, plus raising Janelle's kids along with hers most of the time as Janelle worked full time. Christine was overwhelmed by all of this, and she also had a part-time job at night. This is particularly infuriating in my opinion because if Christine still had to work part-time while also having all of those responsibilities, plus raising Janelle's kids as well, looking after her 5 kids, plus Janelle's 6 kids while pregnant, back then, to also work part-time at night is a lot. And around this time is also when Cody made a big commission on that billboard. And rather than contributing that to his existing family, to his wives and kids, whose budgets were already stretched so thin that the squeakiest wheel got the grease per Cody. And Cody took that commission and he spent it on Robyn's rental, along with her tax return money, to be fair, rather than giving that money to his family. And Christine had to work part-time back then. Do you guys remember when Cody explained once, saying that if a kid needed new shoes because the soles of their shoes had holes in them, or they needed extra money for braces and the mom ran out of her monthly money, that child would have to go beg Cody. And Cody said the squeakiest wheel got the grease. That was the state of their finite finances back then in the family. And at that time, as Christine had to work part-time and it was all too much, and she mentioned being overwhelmed, she asked Cody for help and Cody said no. He told her she signed up for this and she needed to uphold her end of the agreement. Christine mentioned all this in a previous episode. She said there was no help to give, as Cody, rather than giving the commission to his family who really needed it, gave this money to move Robyn, and he secured her a rental with that money, as Christine had to sacrifice all that she did and feel like a basement wife in the process while also working part-time at night. Yet Cody was able to give his huge commission to pay for Robyn's rental. And let's remember, Janelle offered to let Robyn stay in her quarters of the big house, but Robyn didn't care to do that. She was comfortable taking from Cody's wives and kids. She took that separate rental paid for by Cody and partially with her tax return, which I doubt went too far. And Robyn was comfortable sleeping at night, living off of Cody. And Cody and Janelle helped pay all of Robyn's bills and expenses. Robyn didn't even try to work at all. So she was a liability, draining the family's resources, living for free off of them, taking directly from all of Cody's kids and wives in order to live in that rental, without the conscience or the moral fortitude to feel she should work to pay for herself, to not take from the family and their budget. As Christine was overwhelmed, when she went to her husband, who's supposed to be her support system, he told her he couldn't help her. Robyn was 30 plus years old at that time. She could not find a way to work to help pay for her home or her bills or her food or her kids' expenses, when she claims that before she got engaged, she was able to work. She supported herself. She supported her kids. Yet, unfortunately, her ability to work and support herself came to a close and she slept fine at night, mooching off the family. When she entered the family, she sat on her ass as a pregnant Christine had to work part-time at night. She was overwhelmed as Robyn freeloaded off of the family. Maybe if Cody's family got that big commission they could have used for their budget, Christine wouldn't have a full-time role caregiving for the kids in the family and doing all the household chores while also being pregnant and working part-time at night. Robyn worked before she entered the family, yet she contributed nothing to the family. Could she not at least get a part-time job to pay for some of her expenses like a grown 30-plus-year-old woman with kids would normally do? Why did Christine have to work part-time at night as Robyn got a free ride? What the fuck is up with that? Christine had to produce some sort of income at night, and she was also overwhelmed by all of her responsibilities. So Aspen was in 5th grade at the time. She was around 10 years old. And at night, she would have to tuck the kids in bed, running the household while Christine was at work. Christine told Cody she really needed help with this. She just wanted Cody to tuck in her kids at night so that Aspen didn't have to do that. Cody told Christine that he can't do it. He is in other houses. There's no way. And Christine told Cody, but they all lived in one house. And she asked him, you just can't come over and tuck my kids in bed and talk to them a little bit and get them in bed? And Cody refused. He said no, he cannot do it. In confessional, Cody says, Christine says that, and that never happened. He says he doesn't know what Christine is talking about. Deny, 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 lie, lie, lie. Cody has a nasty habit of gaslighting and saying, this never happened, that never happened. What's she talking about? Listen, are we more apt to believe Christine is lying, inventing stories, or that all of this happened exactly as Christine recounts it, And Cody's only strategy is to deny and try and make us doubt Christine. I think Cody thinks that if he says it adamantly enough, insisting it never happened, that maybe we're going to believe him. We know already that Christine mentioned on the show that she needed help in the past, and Cody told her no. She mentioned it in earlier seasons. We also know Cody likes to make Christine seem unstable and irrational, and then he acts clueless as to why. Christine would act so crazy, so irrationally, when he knows exactly why she behaves that way, and she doesn't behave crazily, and she doesn't behave irrationally. And an example of Cody doing this to Christine is the Utah conversation, where he tries to paint her as irrational, like he just doesn't know why she would behave this way when he knows it's all about him and his behavior. In private, Cody told Christine he wanted to move. He was supportive. Then, when she pitched the idea of a move to Utah to all of the adults, Cody was the loudest voice of opposition there. Christine felt betrayed. She was in tears. She was expecting Cody's support. Cody would say things after that conversation like, "I don't know why she is acting this way. Why is she reacting like this? So emotionally, she's overreacting. 1 minute she's fine and happy, and the next second she's angry." Cody would say things like, "I don't get it." When it happened, that's what Cody did. He tried to make Christine sound irrational and over emotional, like she's overreacting, like he has no clue why. And only later did Cody admit that he had told Christine he wanted to move to Utah. He gave her false hope. He gave her the impression that he would back her when she brought this to the group. And when Cody saw that his wives would drive a stake through his heart if he wasn't opposed to this move, he was the coward with the shrinking balls and the loudest voice of opposition to the move, when with Christine in private, he was almost giddy about the prospect of moving to Utah. Christine reacted as she did, and she was incredibly emotional because she felt betrayed. She wasn't expecting it. It hurt her. It was a light bulb moment of, "I cannot do this." Cody tried to make Christine seem rational and emotional with no valid reason. Only later did Cody come clean. And that is what Cody is trying to do now. He's trying to make it seem like Christine is lying, like she's exaggerating, like she is rewriting history, like it's just not true, like Christine is dishonest, like Christine is a liar, when we know that's not true. When all else fails and the only option would be Cody taking his own accountability for his behavior, Cody won't hesitate to throw a wife or one of his children under the bus. He won't hesitate to call them liars. Cody did this with Gabe regarding COVID. Gabe said Cody was gone for 9 months. Cody insisted Gabe is exaggerating. He's lying at the last tell-all because otherwise Cody would have to own his choices and take accountability. And that is something Cody is incapable of. So when Cody calls people liars, when he says, "This never happened, that never happened, this person is too emotional, they're overreacting, they're irrational, I don't know why they're acting like this," Cody knows exactly why. And somehow he thinks he's getting away with his bullshit, slithering like a snake, and that no one is smarter than he is. No one is more capable. Cody is the best. No one can ever reach Cody's heights, his high standards, his high expectations. He is just superior to everyone. Remember last episode how Cody said he has high expectations and higher standards than everybody in the family that everybody fails to reach. It's ridiculous, he says, how no one but him can reach his own standards. That's code for Cody has no self-esteem, he has no confidence deep down on the inside, and that huge ego masks deep insecurity, or this guy wouldn't be acting like such a dick face and a douche canoe. He always has to mention he's an alpha male, he has high standards, he's the best. Why? Why is he having to sell that? If it were true, if it were genuine, he wouldn't need to sell it. He wouldn't need to try to convince himself. It sounds like Cody doesn't even believe it himself, but he thinks if he says it enough, people will see him that way. People will perceive him the way he wants to be seen and not the way he really is. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. It's just an opinion. Cody says, as he looks back on this and he analyzes what Christine is saying, Christine wasn't wanting a fairness with the other wives. She was wanting more. She was asking for stuff that Cody just couldn't give her because he had other wives and other children to be tending to as well. Okay, so now Cody is trying to make it seem like he focuses on doing things fair and equal among his wives and kids, when we know that's utter bullshit. Why does Robyn get a nanny when she has 3 adult kids, plus herself and Cody there at home, with 2 at least elementary school aged kids? Christine raised her kids, plus Janelle's, plus the homeschooling, plus the housework and the shopping and the cooking. And when she was pregnant, she also had to work a part-time job at night. She asked for help. She just asked for Cody to tuck the kids in bed. And Cody said no. He instead allowed his 10-year-old daughter to have to be in a parentified role running the house at night when she deserved to be a kid. And Cody could easily have pitched in. Notice how Cody only brings up being fair and equal with his wives when it's convenient to him, because it will, in his mind, justify him neglecting to help Christine tuck the kids in. He wants to say, well, he had to be fair and equal, and Christine demanded more than what everyone else got, when that isn't the case. If Cody cared about fair and equal, why did Robyn get a 10-day honeymoon away from all of his wives and kids? Robyn got more consecutive one-on-one time with Cody and a bigger vacation for her honeymoon than any of the wives got for their 3-day road trips that Cody just threw together haphazardly. Cody also missed 10 straight days in the rotation with his other wives and kids, who only got a quarter of his time. So Cody doesn't care about fair and equal. He only uses it as a justification when he wants to try and cover his ass for looking like a dick for not helping his pregnant, overwhelmed wife who had to work a part-time job, as Robyn lived rent-free off of Cody's big commission. Cody couldn't bother to tuck in their kids, so 10-year-old Aspen wouldn't have to run the house as a child herself, so that they could avoid parentifying her at such a young age. Cody said no to just helping with tucking the kids in because it was inconvenient for him, because Cody is selfish and Cody is lazy and Cody only loves conditionally. There was nothing in it for him, and he didn't feel for Christine being overwhelmed. And we also know that before Truly, unfortunately, Christine suffered a scary, life-threatening miscarriage with complications. She hemorrhaged, and she was telling Cody that she was overwhelmed by doing all of this caregiving and cooking and shopping and housework, raising her kids with Janelle's every day, and then having to work at night part-time. She knew it was a high-risk pregnancy. She knew she was stressed. She knew she was overwhelmed. She went to her husband. She expected support from him. All she asked was for him to help tuck the kids in at night, and he told her no help. No help for you. He told her, you signed up for this. That's cruel, that's abusive, that's mean, and that's negligent. If Christine is pregnant and Cody cares about his kid growing inside Christine, if Cody cares about Truly and her having a safe entrance into this world, you would think that he wouldn't mind to roll up his sleeves to take the stress off his wife and his 10-year-old child, who should not have to be tucking all the kids in at night and running the household at night on a weekly basis. Why couldn't Cody do it? It had nothing to do with him being fair to his wives and kids. It had nothing to do with Christine being too demanding, asking for too much. Cody couldn't think of anyone but himself. He didn't think of the risk to Christine and the baby because she had a miscarriage before Truly, or the stress being overwhelmed would put on Christine and on the baby, and how that could lead to even more risk of a miscarriage, which was already there. He didn't think of Christine's mental health and her well-being, or about Aspen and her stress as a 10-year-old child having to run the house for her siblings at night as Christine had to work part-time. Cody didn't care that it would be nice for his kids to be tucked in by their own father since their mom wasn't there. And he said that he couldn't do it because he had to maintain fairness. But since when was fairness a priority to Cody? It's hard to even pretend that he cares about things being fair and equal when he has a blatant favorite wife who matters more than the others, and he has a different set of standards for that wife and her kids than the rest of the family. And that wife enables Cody's bad behavior because she will feed his ego to prevent Cody from hitting rock bottom, which he needs to hit to gain a shred of humility and self-awareness. And as that favorite wife, Robyn feeds Cody's ego. She is able to whisper in his ear, all the while making him think her ideas are his. And Cody's way too whipped to even notice. Back then, Cody was saying he had other wives and kids to tend to. But it's interesting that during COVID, he only was able to tend to one wife and her kids. He didn't seem to care about fairness and equality for all the wives and kids when he lived monogamy with Robyn during the pandemic, did he? So it's only when it conveniences Cody that he mentions fairness to the whole family, because he needed a valid excuse as to why he was too lazy and callous to tuck in his kids, and why he would instead allow his 10-year-old daughter to become parentified when she was just a kid herself, who should be tucked in by him as well too. They all lived in one house. It would maybe take 20 or 30 minutes of his time each night. Could Cody not sacrifice that? Cody talks of his high standards and expectations that only he can reach. But his actions show that that bar of standards is set so low, it's on the fucking ground. Cody tells Christine it wasn't just about him and Lehigh. Cody says Christine was telling him things about her sister wives that she didn't like about them and how that relationship was. Christine says in confessional, she knows that she isn't the best sister wife. She isn't that close to Mary or that close to Robyn, but she is super close to Janelle. Christine says she gets jealous, so it's really hard to have relationships with sister wives who have a good marriage with Cody. It's really difficult. Cody points at Christine very aggressively with his little finger, and he says to her, "You don't get to blame me alone for how this relationship has gone for us." And Christine says she isn't blaming him alone. Cody says she is blaming him alone. She is telling him he is never around and that he is not here, that he was not going to her house regularly even before COVID. Christine asks Cody how many days he has spent with them, full days before COVID. She reiterates to Cody full days that he spent there. Cody is silent, of course, and Christine says in confessional, "Let's just say we have lived here in Flagstaff for 800 days. She says Cody went hiking with them once, he's been kayaking with them twice, and one time he didn't even get in the water. That's 3 times Cody has gone with them out of 800 days. Cody tells Christine he was here for full days regularly. He remembers full days here, he tells Christine. But he says when people work, they leave the house. When people have things to do, they leave the house. In confessional, Cody is dismissive. He says he doesn't have time to play like Christine has time to play. Cody says he has a lot of work to do, he has a lot of responsibilities, and he doesn't get this, you don't show up here, and stuff like that. He says it's like, what are you doing all day? And he says it's certainly not cooking and cleaning. Because then Cody stops himself. He throws up his hands and he says, listen, there is nothing to say here. Last season, Cody mentioned that Christine had an employee when he was trying to shame everyone and talk down to them for how dangerous and risky they were being in regards to COVID. Even though, of course, they followed the CDC guidelines as much as possible. Just because some of Cody's wives and kids refused to bend the knee and be dictated to on how to live per Cody's protocols. It doesn't mean they did nothing. They still were as safe as possible. They still followed CDC guidelines within reason. And Cody acted like they did nothing, and he treated them like they were idiots the whole time who did absolutely nothing. And Cody was mentioning how dangerous it was for Garrison's clients and his coworkers, and how dangerous it was for Christine's employee. When ironically, again, Cody and Robyn's employee, the nanny, is the one who made the protocols, and she was the point of exposure for the whole family. And Garrison wasn't spreading around COVID irresponsibly at his job, and Christine wasn't giving COVID to her employee to bring back to her family. I think Cody wants to suggest that Christine is lazy and her job is supposed to be cooking and cleaning in the house. And I think what he was about to suggest is that she has help to cook and clean by mentioning that Christine certainly doesn't do it. Listen, if Christine has a cleaning lady, who cares? No big deal. Anyone who can afford it and can use the help should get help if they can afford it, and good for her. Christine cleaned that huge house for years. If she wants help now and she can afford it, good for her. And if she wants to spend her time going kayaking and hiking, good for her. If Robyn can have a nanny with 3 grown adult kids, plus herself and Cody in the home to help with just 2 elementary school aged kids, then there is absolutely nothing wrong with Christine electing to have an employee who might help her with chores. After all she sacrificed, if she can afford it, more power to her. I don't know why Cody is trying to say Christine isn't cooking or cleaning like it's a problem. Why is it his business? Why does it matter if she goes and has fun? And if she can afford a cleaning lady, she should have one. He is being sexist. He's putting her down as if her only role is to cook and clean, and now she's hired someone for that. Like she's an immature child who plays and has help to do cooking and cleaning. So she and the kids can go play as if she is irresponsible and some type of nitwit in Cody's eyes. No one is calling out that maybe Robyn might sleep till noon as her kids have the nanny during that time. Does Cody complain that Robyn is lazy, sleeping, or playing around instead of mothering her kids or doing the housework? Why was he saying she certainly doesn't cook or clean? Like it's a problem, like it's her job, like that's all she's good for. Like she shouldn't be out having fun, like she should be on her knees, scrubbing floors, making peach cobbler, or she's a heathen. Cody only makes himself look bad whenever he tries to put Christine down. Christine asks Cody, "Why are you insisting on holding on to me? Why?" And Cody puts his hand up and he says, "Whoa." Christine tells him, "This is not working." She tells Cody, "You said it wasn't working too." She says he said he wasn't interested in her. Cody has his head down. He's not making good eye contact. He has his hand to his face. And all I can focus on is the huge, prominent bald spot. It looks so bad every time he puts his head down. I wish he would just cut his hair. This really isn't a good look. He looks desperate, like he's having a midlife crisis. Christine tells Cody, he said he wasn't interested in her and he wasn't interested in a sexual marriage with her. She tells Cody he said that. She tells Cody he said that people survive for years without having an intimate marriage. And she tells him, "You said that." She asks if he expects that to be enough for her. And Cody tells Christine she is blaming him for him being turned off by her behavior. In confessional, Christine says that she and Cody have been married for 25 years. She has known him for almost 30 years. She says, "Don't insult me. Tell me straight up if you don't want to be married to me anymore and you don't want an intimate marriage with me anymore." She says, flipping, tell me. Cody's too much of a coward to tell her. Christine says it is cowardly. She says, man the fuck up. Come on. Fuck yes. I couldn't say it better myself. Christine asks Cody, so why would I want you in my bed? And Cody tells Christine, I bought this house, I bought this furniture, I bought this bed. As he turns to point to a bed in another room, he tells her, this is his place too. Christine tells him she knows that, but she tells Cody, you don't love me. In confessional, Christine says, it's so embarrassing. This conversation, just looking at it, is so embarrassing. And she puts her head in her hands. It's not embarrassing for Christine. Christine is inspiring so many women out there who are in similar situations that there is hope. This is embarrassing for Kotex. Look at the way he treats Christine and the way he treats his whole family, because he is too much of a spineless coward to admit he would prefer to live monogamy with Robyn instead of being a man and being honest and causing less damage. He prefers to be abusive and manipulate to attempt to systematically try to push his wives to leave him. He calls his family an obstacle to his goals in life, and he seems to have the same system with each wife that he uses to try and push them out. He said last tell-all he can't divorce his wives, but they can leave him. And so, in my opinion, Cody is trying to facilitate their departure by being manipulative, by being cruel and abusive and mean, rather than just being a man and ending things and keeping it as amicable as possible for the kids, and also doing less damage to all the relationships. These are the mothers of his kids. These are his kids. You would think he would want to try to keep everything as amicable as possible. And you would think that he would want to try to be a decent man and do this with dignity in the way that would cause the least pain and the least stress, because everyone signed up for this, and he signed up for this telling his wives that he could fulfill this role, when it appears he can't even do the basics as a husband and a father. Instead of being a man with a backbone and trying to do this in a diplomatic and amicable way for the kids' sake at least, Cody would prefer to hurt people and do more damage and trauma than is actually necessary so that the women leave him and he doesn't have to be the guy who didn't hold up his end of the deal. Cody loves to remind his wives so lovingly that they signed up for this every time their struggles with the lifestyle are brought to his attention. And he automatically wants it dropped. He doesn't want to be inconvenienced. He doesn't want the inconvenience of having to validate this for his wives. He doesn't want to have to support them through it. Cody is incredibly emotionally lazy, and he prefers to only do what is convenient for him in all aspects of his life. Cody always comes first for Cody. Christine tells Cody, being married to you has been heartache and it's been pain, because she tried for so long. She tried so hard to be what he needed. Cody says he agrees. Christine says she tried to do everything she could do to make it so Cody would want to be around her. She tried so hard. And Cody responds that Christine did everything but treat her sister wives with kindness and respect. Christine tells Cody she doesn't know what he means by that. And Cody says, okay, cynically. In confessional, he says that statement makes him want to scream, as if he hasn't had his heart broke for years by Christine's complaints, by her hatred of plural marriage. Cody says Christine is great at being willing to mother Janelle's kids, but she was never willing to mother or be a good mother to Robyn's kids. Cody says the reason he isn't attracted is because Christine is not being loyal, because he feels betrayed. Okay, so first of all, there was a time in Vegas where Christine really wanted to be there for Robyn's kids, and Robyn didn't trust her. And we will now go over that scene in that episode to confirm that Christine did try with Robyn's kids. And also, when Robyn had Solomon, I want to remind everyone that Christine made Robyn that beautiful cross stitch that says our family has grown by 2 feet. So Christine really did try with Robyn, and she did try with her kids. We know Cody is grasping at straws to come up with reasons about Christine's issues that he has with her. And he brings up that Christine isn't willing to be a mother to Robyn's kids, when that is in direct contradiction to a scene in Sister Wives. It's season 8, episode 4. One More Woman in Cody's Life is the episode title. Around the 17-minute mark, Christine mentions how she has to move her mom, and it's hard for her because of the reason why she has to have her mom move in. Because the reason Christine wanted plural marriage was she liked the idea of helping to raise her sister wives' kids. And she liked the idea of having her sister wives help her to raise her kids. She says they haven't been able to do that in Vegas. They're all too busy. Christine says in this scene that they were all busy, they were all working. Christine is sitting in confessional with all of her sister wives and Cody, and Christine tells Robyn it was really tough on her when Robyn got a babysitter. And Robyn is floored by this. Her mouth is wide open. Christine tells Robyn her first thought was, why aren't I good enough? Why don't you trust me with your kids? Why wouldn't you ask me first? She asks Robyn, she tells her, I didn't get it. Christine explains that Mindy is her niece and she had to bring in Mindy to help care for her kids while they work. Christine tells Robyn she was thinking, don't you want a relationship with me? Don't you want a relationship with your sister wife? Robyn is pissed. Like, she can't believe Christine would bring this up. Her eyes are angry. She looks very annoyed. And she asks Christine, are you being serious right now? And Christine says, yes, completely. It broke my heart. Christine tells Robyn, you are never going to need me. Never. And Robyn looks floored. Robyn says she can't ask these guys, her sister wives, to help her with the kids because they work the same hours that she works. And this is where Mindy comes in to help take care of the kids. Cody says this is a win-win situation. Christine looks hurt, Robyn looks dumbfounded, and Christine just shakes her head no in silence. Christine says the way they used to run it when they lived in Utah and Wyoming is they had their work schedules organized in such a way so that there was always one mom at home taking care of the kids. Christine says the kids were raised as this little pack of people together, like they really only had one mom. But since they came to Vegas, they're all working and working together. So there is no time when Christine's sister wives can help her watch her kids or when Christine can help with their kids. And it's heartbreaking to Christine because to her, part of their wonderful magic was that they did that for each other. Robyn says when one of her sister wives does something for her kids, it makes her love them. She says if she is struggling with her sister wives, it softens her heart and she realizes her sister wives love her kids. And she says, that's awesome. If that's so awesome, why was Christine not good enough to help take care of her kids? Christine says it almost feels like she is giving up hope that they will be able to have that time where they really, really relied on each other because now the sister wives don't have to. Robyn is crying as usual in this scene, and she tells her sister wives and Cody, you guys are like, it's over. It's not there. I don't feel bonded. And she is like, every single bit that she gets, every single bit that her kids get, she hangs onto. And she goes, see, it's still there. She knows what her sister wives are saying is true, but she doesn't like it when everyone says it's gone, it's over with. And she is going, it can't be over with because she has the same dream and the same desire as her sister wives. So, When Cody says Christine was never willing to be a good mother to Robyn's kids, it is absolute bullshit because she was willing. And Robyn didn't trust her. She preferred to leave her kids with Mindy, so that's bullshit. Cody is just grasping at straws, and he is reaching so hard that his brain is malfunctioning now. He doesn't feel attracted because he feels betrayed. So Cody is saying that his attraction is conditional on if Christine behaves as he wants her to with her sister wives and with him. And that's sick and twisted, and it's very manipulative to take a cornerstone of any healthy functioning marriage: intimacy, affection, closeness, vulnerability, emotions, sex, and to use that as a leverage that can be removed or placed on the table in order to modify a wife's behavior according to how you want her to interact with you or her other sister wives, particularly the favorite sister wife. That's really sick and twisted, especially knowing Cody has other places for intimacy when Christine has no one else. And for Cody to say her disloyalty feels like betrayal and it turns off his attraction to her is even more fucked. He is saying, be obedient, blindly obey, and I will then switch my attraction to you on. I'll tolerate you. He's trying to condition Christine to accept control, and that's really gross and disturbing and abusive. And I am so happy for Christine that she is free now. She deserves so much more than this douche canoe with a bad hairline and no backbone. She's way too pretty for Cody inside and out. She's far too strong. She's far too intelligent. She has far too much unconditional love to give. She needs more of a man than this guy. She needs more than a man who has his balls in Robyn's sling. Cody tells Christine, it's true, we married under circumstances that were not romantic. Christine says they were for her, but not for him. And she says it was romantic for her. Cody says he didn't know better. And Christine asks, and had you known better? Cody says, had he known better? And he stops himself. And Christine says, you wouldn't have married me. And Cody tells her it felt like they were following through with the destiny. Christine says she knows, but she asks Cody, do you think I want to be in a marriage where it was bad? And Cody tells Christine they were in a marriage. After that, they got in a marriage that was wonderful. Christine tells Cody it wasn't wonderful for him. And Cody says he can't sit and have Christine criticize and undermine other people in their whole lives, and he can't watch her do that and feel respect for her. Christine tells Cody she isn't undermining anybody. And Cody tells Christine he fell in love with her because he thought she was treating people great. And then she started treating people badly. And that really messed with that. Cody is basically showing that he can only love conditionally based on if his wives and kids do things to his convenience and to his liking. Once a wife or a child diverts from whatever behavior pleases Cody, then the love is yanked away. So it's not genuine unconditional love that Cody seems to have for his wives and kids. Look at the Gabe sitch. Cody was pissed that Gabe was calling him out for living exclusively at Robyn's house for 9 months. And Cody was butthurt that Gabe wasn't bending at the knee for the nanny's stupid COVID protocols. Cody claims to have made those protocols with his doctor, by the way, but he actually made them with his nanny. And so because it's just conditional love that Cody has for his son, and Gabe bruised his ego big time by not bending the knee, Cody stopped regularly calling Gabe. If anyone does anything that doesn't boost Cody's ego or isn't to his liking or his favorite wife's liking, Cody will pull away in an attempt for that person to modify their behavior. Because Cody is one sick fuck and he thinks he's smarter than everyone. He wants to be a puppet master polygamist overlord. And Cody's losing his shit because somewhere in there, he must know what a spineless coward he is and that no one admires or respects him any longer and that no one has faith in him. There's a simple saying, you get what you give. If you put out resentment into the universe and into your family, you will get it back. If you admire and respect those around you, they will return that. What you give, you will get. Cody gave a lot of hate and resentment and toxicity, and once a person on the receiving end of bullshit sees it for what it is, they will just disengage. They're not going to ever want to have anything to do with Cody if he continues down this path. Christine left. Cody tried to get Mary to leave, and she has decided to stay. And I think Janelle will be next for Cody to try and push out. But I guess we will see. His family are obstacles to his goals in life. And what does one do with an obstacle other than crush it, overcome it, or bypass the block? I think Cody sees his family as a block to what he wants, which is monogamy. And I seriously feel if Cody had a family meeting, and if Cody was a man and he apologized for his toxic ways, and if he said he wants monogamy, his wives might be pissed, his kids too, but they would be less pissed and less traumatized than Cody hurting everyone every chance he gets because he hates himself and he hates his life and he wants everyone to be miserable with him because misery loves company. Why can't Cody be a man and just do this with dignity? Why is Cody's ego more important than his blood? He would rather continually hurt people and burn the bridge than to do this with dignity and inflict less pain and damage to keep things as amicable as possible. It's a very weird choice, but it shows Cody doesn't know what unconditional love is. Everything seems very conditional. If you do this, I will bang you. If you do that, I will come by and be your dad. And I will be a husband to my wife. But if you don't do this, I won't call you for months. Even though I'm the dad and you're my blood, you're my son. Is Cody's ego worth it? When this man is 90, frail, skin and bones, sitting alone on Coyote Pass with his walker and his soccer mom visor, will his ego comfort him through sickness or death? By then, he will realize his ego was on a fool's errand, and he will call his kids. He will call his old wives, Christine and Janelle. He'll call Mary, and everyone is going to ask, Cody who? No one will have time for that because Cody didn't have time for anything but his ego when it mattered. And his ego will be all that's left in the end if he doesn't find a way to learn. Let me tell you something. If this guy gets monogamy, let's say he gets it. He gets to live monogamy with Robyn. Let's say that's what he wants. Even if Cody got monogamy with Robyn, he won't be happy then either. Because I don't think the problem is polygamy. Right now with Cody, the problem isn't his wives or his kids. The problem lies with Cody between his two ears. And I don't know what is loose in there or what needs tweaking, but this guy isn't happy within himself. And if he's not happy within himself, he will never be happy with anything. He's not going to be happy with polygamy. He's not going to be happy living monogamy with his soulmate. Living monogamy with his soulmate won't fix it either. I think Cody is just miserable. He will be miserable in monogamy. He will be just as miserable in monogamy as he would continuing on with polygamy. I don't know if this is his age or his ego or his narcissistic traits, in my opinion, or maybe he has some other thing going on. I don't know. But this isn't how a person acts that has even just a shred or two of happiness within them. He isn't a happy person, and I don't know why, but I don't think anything could please him at this point. And I really don't think it's about polygamy. It's something within Cody. And if he is this miserable, I think he should go figure it out with a quickness because he has two little kids that deserve better than a miserable old curmudgeon for a father. And maybe, just maybe, if Cody helps himself, he could do better as a father with them. Christine asks how long it's been since she has treated people badly when she was insecure. Christine says basically what Cody is saying is the reason he is unattracted to her is because she treats her sister wives terribly. Christine asks, is that what he's saying? In confessional, she says she doesn't care what he is saying. She isn't just being mean. She says she had all these criteria she had to meet in order for Cody to be attracted to her. She asks, "Can we just say it's over then, if there's criteria for him to be attracted to me?" Christine deserves someone who loves her as she is, who accepts her as she is, who can give her what she deserves, who sees her as an equal. It's incredibly abusive to tell someone they are unattractive, but if they jump through hoops, X, Y, and Z, then maybe they'll be more attractive. It's demoralizing and dehumanizing, and it's very abusive and manipulative. And it also conditions that person to feel bad about themselves and then to derive all of their worth from you. And if they please you, you give them more crumbs. And if they don't, you withdraw. That's very cruel and toxic and disgusting and abusive. And Christine deserves way better. Christine says if she has to meet all these criteria in order for Cody to be attracted to her, she just can't be herself. And she says, he is just not attracted to me. And she can probably count on her hand how many times Cody actually told her she was beautiful. And she doesn't think it has anything at all to do with her sister wives. Cody asks Christine if she is saying that now she just sees the marriage as completely unsalvageable. Christine tells Cody it's over. She asks him, "Why do you feel different?" Cody has his hands cradling his face. He is stressed. He asks, "So we can unravel this further," because he says it's true that he wasn't attracted to her when they got married. He says he felt pressured into marriage. He says he did not know better. He keeps saying he didn't know better. But in the book, Cody says he felt like it was too soon to marry Christine. He wanted to wait to marry Christine, but Christine didn't want to put the marriage off. And Cody had lots of doubts about it at the wedding. Christine described Cody as having 1,000-yard stare, and she said he was morose and had the look of having the weight of the world on his shoulders. Cody described his wedding day as a hard day. Christine noticed that Cody was unhappy and distant on his wedding day, and that continued into the honeymoon. See, Christine was always head over heels for Cody. She wanted to court him many times. Mary wasn't down, and Cody said no a few times. And then eventually, after Cody almost married her friend, who he had to wait to get engaged to so that she would turn 18, she was a minor when they courted, that friend called that marriage off. And then Cody married second wife Janelle, and he courted Christine, but he never loved her. Christine loved him. And Christine's dad wanted Christine to marry Cody. He said Cody was athletic, he liked that, and he liked Cody's faith. Christine married Cody, and I think a lot of Cody marrying Christine had to do with her family's position in their church. I think for Cody, what he got out of marrying Christine was a status thing because she was polygamous royalty. And if Cody didn't love her and he knew he had doubts, he should have just been honest with Christine. He knew way before the wedding, actually. In the book, he writes, "I wanted to prolong our engagement, but Christine didn't want to. She insisted on setting a wedding date as quickly as possible. She believed that a long courtship would be inappropriate and unfair on her new sister wives. She didn't want to be running around with a married man. I tried telling her that I wasn't quite ready, but Christine felt that she'd already waited so long. We'd been friends for 3 years. We decided to get married in 6 weeks. The minute I asked Christine to marry me, I realized that I had, once again, acted too quickly. I was in over my head. I was not even 25. I already had 2 wives, and Janelle was expecting our first child. The thought of trying to bring Christine into our family gave me serious pause. I'm afraid I showed up at our wedding with what Christine calls 1,000-yard stare. Suddenly, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I was nervous and apprehensive. If Cody was sure he wasn't ready, which it seems like he was sure, why couldn't he just say to Christine, If we get married, it's supposed to be for life, and I have a lot to adjust to with 2 wives and 1 wife being pregnant. So we should do a longer courtship so we can get accustomed to each other and so you can get prepared for the dynamics of the house. Let's do this right. Would that not have caused less hell and aggravation than marrying Christine when he knew he wasn't ready and doing this way now? Christine deserved so much better. So when Cody says he did not know at that time back then, let's remember he knew. Christine is laughing in confessional. She says, "Oh my gosh, really? He didn't know better?" Christine asks, "So did he marry me out of an obligation?" My guess would be Cody married Christine because of her status in the church. Christine says their church doesn't have the whole arranged marriages, but to her, it sounds like Cody felt he had to marry her. And Christine says it's so sad. Cody says when they found a good place in that marriage, he felt like it was destiny. Christine says it was great for years. And Cody asks, "So why is it so easy to get rid of it?" And Christine explains, because it's been 10 years of sad and heartbreak. She says her heart has been shattered enough. Cody is frustrated, clearing his throat over aggressively as Christine tells him if she thinks it's dramatic, she doesn't know, but she tells Cody her heart has been shattered enough. And Cody says, okay. Christine asks, why would you hold onto this? Cody thinks it's irresponsible at the point they are at with their kids, at the point they are, to divorce now. Cody says in confessional he thinks they should be working towards a reconciliation for the sake of their kids. Cody thinks it's bad timing. He is dumbfounded. He is grabbing at straws still because he shrugs and he says, it literally is like she has moved on and he is still sitting there like a dope. Cody says he feels pathetic. He is angry and he feels pathetic. Christine tells Cody, look, you're talking about Isabel. And Cody tells Christine he struggled to keep his family healthy for so long at major sacrifice for himself. Christine tells Cody before he gets angry that she defended him. And Cody asks, why don't I believe that in the state that you are at? Why the fuck should Christine defend Cody? Isabel has a right to feel however she feels. She is at least 18 with an intelligent mind. If she takes issue with her dad not being there, she has a right to be pissed. And it's not up to Christine to defend Cody to Isabel. And Isabel is valid in whatever it is that she feels. And it's not Christine's job to clean up after Cody every time he fucks up with one of their kids. It's not easy to have a parent with Cody's personality type. It's actually very difficult to not only have to watch your parents interact in an abusive way, but to also have to walk on eggshells. And it's really not appropriate or healthy for kids. And this idea Cody spouted about staying together for the kids' sake, that's a bad idea. If there is a toxic relationship going on, it's much more toxic for the kids to stay together than to separate in these cases, just from my experience. When Christine says she defended him and Cody asks, why don't I believe that in the state that you're in? Christine says, it's because you don't trust me. And Cody acknowledges that's true. He doesn't trust her. And he raises his voice and he points his finger very aggressively at Christine here. And Christine asks him not to point his finger at her or the conversation is over. He points his finger again and she asks, don't point your finger at me. Cody tells Christine to stop pointing the blame at him. He tells her that she and him have intimacy. They have love in their relationship. And he says he's sorry it's conditional based upon being a part of a plural family. Christine says a couple of times a year doesn't work for a marriage. Cody sighs and he looks down and he says, when Christine says a couple of times a year, it feels like an accusation. Christine tells Cody that he isn't interested in an intimate marriage with her, but she was interested in an intimate marriage with him. Cody asks, "You are?" And he does it with enthusiasm, as if he sees this as a point where he can now offer her sex to reinstate the relationship or something. And Christine reminds Cody, she says, was Cody, meaning she was interested in the past. See, now that Christine is leaving, Cody will suddenly be willing to have sex with her magically. Christine reiterates that she isn't interested in an intimate marriage with Cody anymore. She says even at this point, if Cody said they could have intimacy again, she would not believe it for a second. She says it's not like when she is away from him, he even calls. And Cody says even if Christine said she liked plural marriage and she would be devoted to it, he wouldn't believe that for a second. He tells Christine, "That's our deal. Our deal was plural marriage." Christine says, but in plural marriage, when it was really good for both of them, when she was secure and she had an important place and she was important to him, then plural marriage was awesome. Then she felt displaced and she felt hopeless. And yeah, she got jealous for the first time ever. And she tells Cody he never came back. And Cody says, "Oh my goodness," as he puts both hands to his forehead. Cody says for 10 years, that was the problem. That was the problem, that Christine never got over all that. In confessional, speaking directly to Cody, Christine says, "You are an asshole to think that my value as a human being is contingent upon how you feel I'm treating other people, and you don't find me attractive." Christine says, "I think you are looking for excuses. Why should how I treat the woman you love?" Christine says, "That's just what it comes down to." She says, "I think he has a favorite wife. I think he has a favorite wife, and that's why all of this is like it is." Wow. I think he has a favorite wife, and that's why all of this is like it is. And she goes on. She says, "Apparently, I'm not treating her well enough, so there's nothing I can do." She says, "I mean, honestly, what he is asking from me is ridiculous." Christine tells Cody, "Let's just look at the present and where we are." And Cody says, "Yeah, marriage sucks." And Christine asks, "Cody, do you want to be married to me?" Cody answers with a question. He asks Christine, "Do you want to be married to me because you're the one that shot the first two blows here?" Christine says, "No, I don't want to be married to you." And Cody says he is good with that. Nobody is a prisoner here. Cody asks Christine, "What does that mean now?" And Christine tells Cody she needs to move. She is going back to Utah, where she is surrounded by people that want to spend time with her. And Cody tells Christine, "We have children together." Cody says he has to be in their lives. And just because she decided to travel during COVID, it doesn't mean that he shouldn't have access to his kids. In confessional, Cody says he is just messed up by this. She is taking Truly away now. She is going to move. He says in confessional, "You can't legally leave with her." Then he adds, "I don't think." She can, and she did, so Christine tells Cody it's heartbreaking being around him. It's so hard. Cody is starting to lose his cool. He angrily speaks through gritted teeth. He says, "So what? If you don't love me, if you want to be out, so what? We have a family together." Cody tells Christine we can make hanging out work. He says it could not possibly be worse than the experiences they have had recently. Cody says, "So all right, we aren't lovers anymore, but our family is still a family." He asks Christine, "How do we do that?" He asks, "Are you going to sit here and continue to be jealous for the rest of your life that I love other people and that I feel affection towards them?" Cody says, "That's the poison in this whole thing, is you sat here this whole time going, I want something more than what I'm getting." No. Christine sat here going, I know I deserve more than this, and Cody cannot give more. He cannot love unconditionally. He cannot accept her for who she is, and she knows that now, and she can't continue accepting less than she deserves, and she can't allow Cody to give the kids less than they deserve from him as a father. And she knows Cody has no more fucks to give, and he never did. Cody really is such a pathetic man in everything. He is always a coward. He consistently shows his cowardice. Even with this, he wants to try and find ways to blame Christine and deflect, as if it's on her. I know this person sitting before Cody, Christine, gave this marriage every shred of herself that she could. And you can see it on her face. You can see it in her eyes. And for Cody to sit here and deflect and project and to blame her that she is the poison in the plural marriage, to see this supposed grown man take not a shred of accountability for his part in what led their marriage to this point, is disgusting and horrible. This is very abusive. Instead of Cody being a man and taking accountability for his part in what led their marriage to this point, he blames Christine, blaming her jealousy, blaming her insecurity, blaming her unwillingness to mother Robyn's kids, when that's not the case. He's blaming her hatred of polygamy. He's blaming the way she treats Robyn. Never once did I see Christine on the show mistreat Robyn. Never once did I see Cody ever point the finger at himself and take any accountability for what he signed up for. Never once have I seen Cody own his choices, like he said he wants his kids to do. The only thing Cody said was he should have known better than to marry Christine, when he makes it very clear in the book that he did know before marrying Christine that he wasn't ready. And I think seriously that he married Christine for her status in the church, knowing he did not love her, and that is very sick. Cody is trash. He's worse than trash. He is the garbage juice at the bottom of the trash bag. This is not how you treat the mother of your kids, who loved you wholeheartedly, who dedicated her whole adult life to this family, and who did such a beautiful job sacrificing for the family to raise the kids in such an amazing way. She is the heart of the Brown family, and frankly, if it was me and I was spoken to the way Christine is being talked to, they will be leading my ass out of the house in cuffs, because as much as I appreciate how diplomatic Christine is being, I don't have that quality. That look on Christine's face is like she knows she is dealing with a man who is mentally unstable, who is pathetic, who she has no more respect for, who is a total coward. And with how aggressive Cody was at finger pointing, how does he behave off camera? How loud does he yell? How much further does he go? What happens when the cameras aren't rolling? I am honestly glad a cameraman is there for Christine's sake, because Cody treats these women like they aren't even human, and definitely like he is above them. And I can't even put into words what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a person like this. It's very dehumanizing and demoralizing. Cody says the poison in this is that Christine sat here this whole time saying, I want something more than I am getting. He says each relationship works on its own merits. So Christine is sitting here laying this at the feet of somebody that she is jealous of, but she is not taking accountability for the fact that their relationship together is where the problem lies, and not in some favoritism that he has for any of his wives, Mary, Janelle, or Robyn. Listen, no one will ever accuse Cody of favoritism with Mary, so I love how he listed her first. Cody is in denial. I think he's lost his mind. I think somewhere in there he knows the truth. He knows damn well that he has a favorite wife. He knows damn well that he wants to live monogamy with her. He knows he is unfair with his time and investment as the father and the husband in a plural family, and he doesn't give a fuck. He just wants it to be convenient for him. He knows well that he favors Robyn and her kids and that they get different treatment based on the fact that they allow themselves to be dictated to by him and that they stroke his ego. He said this a million times. He said Robyn was his soulmate, and she said he is her soulmate. Cody knows he has a favorite wife. Robyn knows she's the favorite wife. Robyn's kids know that they get different standards and that they are more favored by Cody, by the rest of the kids in the family. All of this is very obvious. We know that the family dynamic went to shit and Team Brown went to shit when Mary, Cody, Janelle, and Christine added Robyn to the family. When Robyn got added, Robyn prioritized Cody, Cody prioritized her, and it left Mary, Christine, and Janelle on Team Brown, still prioritizing the larger family like they always did, as Cody and Robyn only prioritized their marriage and themselves. And I want to point out what the UNLV professor, Professor Yankowiak, said of what makes a successful plural family and dynamic. He said the wives had to look out for each other and each other's best interests. They had to put the team first ahead of their individual interests, and they had to get along for the dynamic to work. He also said the husband had to have enough money to provide for everyone so that everyone could live well and at an equal level, and that the husband has to do everything fair and equal across the board. He cannot pick a favorite wife and make it blatantly obvious. He has to be fair and equal with his time and affection and investment. The professor also said that the success of a polygamous dynamic largely depends on the husband and his personality type. Once Cody picked a favorite wife and he made that obvious from day one, it created issues between the sister wives. And once they saw that Robyn only prioritized herself and her best interests and Cody, it created distrust, and that was all she wrote. Cody also gave Robyn and her kids different standards and favoritism throughout the courtship, engagement, and marriage. And the other wives and kids in the family took note. Cody was no longer even trying to pretend to be fair and equal. And so, of course, everything went to shit because Cody picked a favorite wife. And as far as the success being dependent on the husband and the type of man he is and his personality type, we just watched Exhibit A, and we have been watching Cody and his personality type and those behaviors associated with it for years, and it was on full display tonight. The main reason this dynamic is no longer working is Cody. His original wives, Christine, Mary, and Janelle, were always willing to work hard. They were always willing to put the family first. They were always willing to work with Cody and to compromise. But Cody wants to be a dictator. He overestimates what he is capable of, and he has an inflated sense of self. He likes to project when deep down he is miserable, he is inept, he is insecure, he has narcissistic tendencies for sure, and an ego he has to lug around like it's his job. He gaslights, he manipulates, he abuses mentally, emotionally, and verbally, in my opinion, and he is very aggressive even on camera when he speaks with his wives, like we saw with Christine today. So I don't know what Cody would do without cameras rolling, but we have to imagine that the Cody we saw on camera tonight and the Cody we've seen for seasons with somewhat of a filter for the cameras, if Cody behaves this badly when it's supposed to be filtered and on camera, just imagine what it might be like off camera. I don't know what he's capable of off camera. I don't want to know. And by the way, stonewalling and withdrawing yourself as a father and a husband in order to force your wives and kids to comply and to be dictated to and to obey with your way is abusive as fuck. I also want to point out that Christine called this in the first season. She foreshadowed this. She said a lot that was intuitive and it foreshadowed so brilliantly. Let's recall her words. She said she felt like Cody was replacing his family with Robyn and her kids. That has come to fruition. She said she felt she was losing her best friend. She was losing the companion that she had in Cody. And that came to fruition. And she also said she knows some women are just in it for the man and they're not in it for the family. They're not in it for the sister wives. She hit the nail on the head. She also said Robyn was the trophy wife. And with that matronly hair and that ever-expanding chin and jawline, it looks like Robyn is aging far worse than any other wife. Because if you have ugly inside, it will start to reflect on your outside as well. Look at Christine. Look at how beautiful she looks as she ages. Look at how vibrant. Once, Robyn referred to Christine as older when she just joined the family and Christine had just had Truly. Robyn made a comment that she thought it was harder for older women to have babies, that it was harder to have babies when you're older, referring to Christine, who had a terrible miscarriage before Truly, where she hemorrhaged and had a health emergency. And so now that Robyn is older, I want to point out how radiant and beautiful and vibrant Christine looks, especially now that she is free from Cody. I think Christine is the heart of the Brown family. And to be honest, looks aren't worth shit. When we pass, we rot away. All that's left is the contents of our soul, our energy. And Christine was the heart of the Brown family. And her soul shows. She has a heart of gold. Her soul, it shows inside and out that she is a very beautiful woman. She's a beautiful soul. And you can see it in how she unconditionally loves the kids, how she raised them, how she set her own wants and needs aside in order to sacrifice and be selfless for the family. She made a huge sacrifice for the family for years. And you can see her heart and the contents of her soul and her character in the relationship she has with her own kids and with the rest of the Brown kids. Christine is just too beautiful and she shines far too brightly, and her soul and her nature is far too pure for an ego-driven, low vibration punk like Kotex. And as Cody speaks, whatever diarrhea comes out of his mouth, he is just saying nonsense words. He is saying empty words so he can deflect while grasping at straws because he refuses to take accountability himself. So instead, he wants to blame Christine and try and make her doubt herself and try to spin his own narrative for viewers that leaves him attempting to look like less of a bad guy, which of course will never work. I think Christine deserves much better than a relationship where she's expected to meet requests and jump through hoops, but King Cody isn't expected to meet any of her requests. She can't even make requests without being dismissed from the second she opens her mouth. Cody would keep moving the goalpost, even if Christine met his requests. All of these hoops Cody is placing for his wives to jump through, whether it be protocols or the demands he makes of his wives, are just to keep his obstacles away from him and his obligation away from him that he no longer wants to fulfill because it's just too inconvenient for him to be a husband and a father. Never mind that this is what he signed up for. Never mind that he preaches that everyone around him needs to own their choices. He doesn't own his choices himself. King Cody is above all that as the leader of the family. I heard that Christine sold her property on Coyote Pass for just $10, allegedly. I think Christine just wants to be done with Cody, and I think for Cody, it's about money. Mansions are expensive, and so is the nanny. Nannies aren't cheap. Cody is impulsive with money, and he's living way beyond his means, it seems. Once the TLC show ends, which I doubt they make that much once it's split 5 ways, Cody and Robyn won't be able to live in the lifestyle they have become accustomed to. Remember the scene when Cody said long ago that if he divorced his wives, he would do all it took to support that wife and her kids, even moving her close to him and paying for it, that he would pay for his kids. Now it's happened, and did he cover Christine, or did she just want to get the fuck out and agree to whatever was in Cody's best financial interests in order to wash her hands of it? Cody cares about pinching his pennies. He's not going to go the extra mile. He's probably not going to compensate Christine at all, because he isn't a decent guy. and he isn't bound legally, and he has no conscience. He's a loser. Christine was very candid. She was very strong in this episode, and I admire that. A lot of women in relationships with men like Cody might gain strength and hope and courage from seeing a woman in their situation have the courage and the strength to say, I deserve better. I think that Christine's journey could help a lot of people, as hard as it is for her to have to endure this while filming. Christine is a superwoman for sure. If it was me, seriously, after the way Cody was talking to her, I would have to leave or I would be walking away in cuffs. If after all those years and 6 kids, I was spoken to in that manner by my ex-husband. Christine has a lot of grace. She has a lot of patience. She has a lot of inner strength. She's a very strong woman, and I admire it. I know what it's like to be spoken to like that, or treated as less than, or like you don't matter the same as other people, like you don't have the same value, where the person doesn't care to see you or acknowledge you, and the person is controlling and cruel and ego-driven. I can't explain the feeling, but it feels like being suffocated, and it's constant walking on eggshells. I am sure Christine tried beyond. I'm sure she tried very hard, but with people with Cody's character and his personality traits, she might as well really be married to the wall. Cody only sees himself, and Robyn enables Cody's behavior and his arrogance. And there is also something very wrong with Cody and his mindset. He will always be like that, in my opinion, and just from my experience, people with those personality traits do not love unconditionally if they're able to love at all. Everything is very conditional. For people like that, their life is just about them from their point of view. They don't have the capacity to care deeply about others, to have empathy, to have compassion. It's sad and scary, and all this display by Cody that we saw today has shown the contents of his character, as if he hasn't shown us time after time after time. Cody says he isn't sure if Christine can legally leave with Truly. And this really isn't our business, I have to say, but I do wonder if Cody is on all of his kids' birth certificates or just Robyn's kids who get to enjoy the benefits of his health insurance if he even gets health insurance through his job. Cody says each relationship works on its own merits. So Christine is sitting here laying this at the feet of somebody that she is jealous of, and she isn't taking any accountability for the fact that their relationship together is where the problem lies, and not in some favoritism he has for any of the other wives, Mary, Janelle, or Robyn. Obviously, we know Christine takes accountability, and we know Cody refuses to take accountability. And now it's probably heartbreaking and infuriating for Christine to be treated in such a condescending and demeaning manner, to the point where Cody wants to blame Christine for her jealousy getting them to this point. He wants to say that Christine refuses to take her own accountability, coming from a guy who doesn't take any accountability at all. Christine has taken accountability this whole time. Instead of acknowledging that, Cody is saying that Christine is refusing to take her own accountability. Instead, she is blaming the wife she is jealous of, Robyn, for the demise of their marriage. She isn't doing that at all, and Cody is just saying anything he can to deflect and shift blame so he can avoid being a decent man and a decent husband who would take accountability himself for not holding up his end of what he and Christine initially signed up for. Cody says he does not respect Christine, but Christine is the one unable to respect him as a husband and a father and a man when he can't even do the basics for his kids as a father. He can't even show up to Isabel's surgery any father would go to. It's unthinkable not to go. And most men would not want it any other way. They will be there. They will climb any mountain they have to be by their daughter's side, regardless of COVID or raging bulls or tornadoes. There would be no obstacle too great that could stop any normal father from being there. But Cody isn't made from the same metal as most men. He doesn't have the testicular fortitude. He doesn't have a strong spine. Instead of being there as a protector, since he says he is protecting his kids from death, he has caused more hardship for his daughter, Isabel, as she had to deal with more suffering because of him when he didn't attend her surgery. Isabel had to deal with great physical pain and also the added emotional suffering of her dad and his decision not to be there for her, abandoning her emotionally and mentally as his daughter. Cody made this harder for his daughter. It was major surgery. She was the child closest to the possibility of medical risk or death in that moment, God forbid. So if Cody is this protector of the family, protecting his kids from death, worried about them so much, why wasn't he with the child in the most danger of something going wrong health-wise? The closest to death, one would argue, when her lung has to be deflated and she has to be put under to put metal screws into her spine to straighten her spine. That's a very major surgery. She could have been in a lot of danger, God forbid, should something go wrong, and he should have been there for her. He says he's responsible to protect the whole family from COVID, and he's worried about his kids possibly dying. He brings up Saul's RSV. He brings up Truly's kidney infection. This child had to have her lung deflated and metal screws put in her spine. Like a badass, she tolerated it and went through that surgery. Like a warrior, Christine cared for her. Where the fuck was Cody as the husband and the father? Protecting them. He's the leader. Why was he not leading Christine and Isabel through this, helping them get through it as a support? Why was Cody initially suggesting that Isabel go alone to do that major surgery when she was in severe pain during a pandemic at maybe just barely 17 and a half or 18 years old? Does this guy have 2 working brain cells left? He made it worse on his daughter. He made it more difficult for her. Any decent human being, not even just a father, anyone, the neighbor, your classmate, the pool guy, if they saw someone suffering, maybe they don't have the decency to help, but they wouldn't go kick a man in the balls who just got knifed in the kidneys. At minimum, they would call for help. They would do something to help the situation. But Cody could not even do that with his own daughter. He made the situation worse. And it's not Isabel's fault that her dad isn't capable of unconditional love. I know what it feels like to have people who are not capable of unconditional love in a parental position. And there is nothing wrong with the child in that situation. They are lovable. They're perfect. And it's nothing regarding the child that makes these type of people love the child less. These people with these personality types are incapable of love. It's all about them. It has nothing to do with the child. But when you're a child in that situation, you don't understand that the certain personality types are incapable of unconditional love, and it's about them, that they are not capable of that type of unconditional love. It's never the other person's fault, and it's very sad and pathetic of a grown adult man to treat his daughter that way and to treat his wife that way. Ex-wife in not attending. In my opinion, Cody is so blinded by his ego. He is so selfish and so overinflated in his sense of self in his mind that he may never be able to love unconditionally or to act with unconditional love. And that's no one's fault but Cody and the woman who enables him to behave this way by bending at the knee for him. And maybe one day that woman will feel stuck too, and she will sit across the table from him, just as Christine is now, and she will realize when he does this same thing to her one day, what the fuck did I get myself into? Who the fuck did I marry? Christine tells Cody that she doesn't know how to make it function as a family. She doesn't know how to stay here in Flagstaff. Cody tells Christine she can grow up and she can do it. And he tells her she can go and get married to somebody else. She can bring them here to Flagstaff and they can become a part of the family. Why in the fuck would Christine want to be involved with Cody other than at major family events or for the kid's sake on a minimal level? Why would she have to be married to be happy? And also, why is Cody telling Christine to grow up when he's not a grown up at all? He has the mentality level of maybe a 12-year-old. Cody has shown he has a maturity level of a 10-year-old, that he's very immature for his age. Christine is a full-grown, mature, well-developed, full-rounded, intelligent adult woman. Why is Cody talking to her like he's her daddy, like she needs to grow up? What the fuck is that? Imagine being in Christine's shoes. Imagine not only being treated in a condescending manner, but also being treated in a condescending manner, being demeaned by a person you have no respect for, and what that feels like to have to sit and take that. Cody is 50 plus, he has bald patches galore, and he still hasn't even learned how to be a grown adult man yet, let alone a decent husband and father. He's been a husband 4 times and a father almost 20 times. When will he be growing up? Cody tells Christine she doesn't break up the family with what she is trying to do if she is a grown-up. He's warning her, if you're a grown-up, you're not going to fuck with the family. You're not going to break us up. Why is he treating her like he is her daddy? Seriously. Threatening her, lecturing like a child, saying she would do things his way. She would keep the family together to his liking if she was a grown-up. Anything other than that, and she's not a grown-up. And if it's not exactly how Cody wants it, if it's not his way, and Christine chooses to move away and live separately, then he is saying that she isn't grown. Bitch, please. He needs to take several seats and take some fucking marital. Cody's out of whack hormones are really clouding his judgment. This is such condescending bullshit. I am going to tell you right now, I am not a violent person. I am not a person who likes to even be around people who even like get angry and get crazy. I know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of craziness. I'm 39 years old. And if a man, especially an idiot with no legs to stand on, with his balls in a sling, treated me like I was a child and tried to use manipulation and abusive tactics on me when I'm trying to have a very adult conversation about leaving, and then he keeps insulting me and condescending and deflecting, I wouldn't be able to sit there. I would have to leave, or the cops would be taking me out of there in a new pair of silver bracelets. He is treating Christine like she is inferior to him, and as if he is superior and mature and so grown, when he is just an insecure little man with an ego to mask his low self-esteem. He has no emotional intelligence. He has no self-awareness. He cannot communicate in an intelligent way. He doesn't take accountability. He will never look inward. He will never look at himself. He will never be real with himself. He will never be real with other people. He will never be genuine. He will never be authentic. He only sees himself through his ego. He will only ever see himself. He will only ever play these manipulative games with the people that he loves. Everything is a game to try and get what he wants, even the dissolution of his marriage. If Cody is this abusive and this aggressive on camera in the edited scenes, what will he stop at off camera? Where is the line when he argues with a wife behind closed doors? Cody points his finger and he tells Christine, grown-ups do that. This man was supposedly too scared to fly during COVID to be with Isabel during surgery. And now he wants to teach Christine what grown-ups do. This guy was jealous. This guy, this grown man, was jealous that Janelle prioritized her sons over Cody to the point where if his name was on the lease, he would be willing to evict them. When they go to school, they work hard, they have jobs. One of them saved enough to almost buy a house and just needed 2 or 3 more months to have the down payment. I don't know anyone in their 20s who's able to do that, and in a market like Flagstaff, which it's super expensive over there. So, I mean, Cody should be proud of his sons. Instead, he's looking for ways, trying to be manipulative, trying to be calculating because his ego is so butthurt that Janelle doesn't pick him over her kids, that he would evict them if he could. That's insane. That's not what a grown, mature adult does. Cody couldn't even be a grown adult and have an open conversation with Gabe, who was pleading for a better relationship with his dad. He was asking his dad to call him more often. He wanted a better relationship. He wanted more communication. He wanted to work hard at it. And Gabe sounded more like the grown, mature adult, and Cody sounded more like the child during that conversation. Gabe was very emotionally intelligent, very self-aware, very articulate. He communicated well. He was honest and direct. Cody just deflected the whole fucking time. He's supposedly the adult. He's the father. He is supposed to be comforting his son, reassuring him that, yes, I want a relationship. And instead, Cody was sitting there blaming his wives, blaming his kids for why he couldn't be there, trying to deflect rather than taking accountability and having an open conversation with his son, saying, I'm sorry, I'll definitely be there, showing him some affection. He didn't even give Gabe one crumb. It was like Gabe was talking to the wall, and it was like Cody was the kid and Gabe was the adult comforting Cody, who was like in a son role. It was very weird. I feel like Cody is some type of Benjamin Button, like he's a baby in an old man's body sometimes with the way he behaves. And he wants to talk about Christine being a grown-up, and he wants to teach her how grown-ups act. He's lecturing her like she's a child. If anyone is an example of a grown-up, he should probably go ask Gabe and Garrison to help him figure it out, since they already seem like they're beyond Cody's level. And they're only in their 20s, and I think that's a huge testament to the mothering and the nurturing and the parenting of Christine and Janelle and Mary in that family, to see how wonderful the kids turned out. And by the way, Christine is very mature and she's very grown and very developed. The only underdeveloped one who needs a lot of maturity, who needs a lot of growth and development, is Cody. He has no business lecturing Christine on what a grown-up does. She does next level nurturing, mothering, and caregiving, top shelf parenting. And you can tell she loves all the kids in the family and that she is so adored. That is unconditional love. You guys want a good example of unconditional love? Look at the relationship between Janelle and Christine, and look at the relationship of the kids and Christine, and the kids and Janelle, her kids and Janelle, and how everyone truly is there for each other and has each other's backs. That's unconditional love. Cody can't even do the basics as a husband and a father. He was able to not only show up for her daughter, but take her through her recovery and rehab like a single mom without anyone's help in the middle of a pandemic, waking up 4 times a night to do her med schedule and helping her deal with her pain and do the exercising and the recovery and the therapy and the doctor's appointments and this and that. It's a process, and she was there. What did Cody do? And she did it all by herself, like a freaking rock star. Maybe Cody should learn from Christine on how to be a grown-up. I think she could give him a lot of great advice. Christine asks Cody, "You expect me to stay here?" And Cody tells her they have kids together, and he says it feels like she has poisoned the well for him. Christine tells Cody she knows he thinks that way. Cody says yes, he believes that. And Christine says she knows he believes that, and she doesn't know if there is anything she can say to tell him that. And Cody cuts Christine off. He says, well, there's not, but they can still actually salvage the family. He says grown-ups make it work for the kids. Grown-ups also suck it up when it's convenient. Even if they're in fear, they put on their big boy pants and they head to their daughter's major surgery, right? Cody wants to demand from Christine that she has to make it work. When did he make it work? Christine did not poison the well or tell the kids how to feel about their dad. Cody, through his behavior and his actions and his words, made his kids feel like they don't matter. that he did not unconditionally love them, that he did not prioritize them. Cody also set different standards, prioritizing one branch of his family and those kids over the others. And the kids notice. Kids are very perceptive. Kids are very intuitive. They aren't dumb. They don't need to be spoon-fed ideas. They don't need to be brainwashed by their mothers to have a thought. They see Cody's abusive behavior. They see his patterns. They see his manipulative tactics, and they don't like the stress. They don't like feeling the anxiety. They don't like walking on eggshells probably when they have to deal with him and be around him. And they probably also don't like how he treats their moms, and they make their own opinions. Christine doesn't poison any well. First of all, his kids are mostly all adults, and his youngest kid is 11, so she already has the intelligence and the wherewithal to come to a conclusion herself and be a free thinker. She doesn't need to be spoon-fed by her mom, and Christine encouraged her kids to probably think for themselves, and she doesn't seem like the kind of mom that sits there bad-mouthing all the time. That's Cody's paranoia. If anything, she seems like the kind of mom who did her best to shelter and protect her kids from this for as long as she could. Christine didn't poison any well. The kids can see for themselves. They aren't stupid. Kids see everything that their parents do. They see the dynamics. They see the way their mom treats their dad treats their mom. And maybe they don't understand the full picture, especially when they are younger, but they feel it in their guts and they absorb the toxic energy. They feel the vibe and they know that they have to walk on eggshells too. So if Cody's kids don't want relationships with him, if they aren't crazy about him, this is his fault because he didn't invest as much as he could have as a father and as a husband. And he allows his bad relationships with his wives to trickle down into how much effort he puts in with his kids and how he treats them. And that's so cruel and unfair to his kids. I have always said the wives are grown adults. They can choose what they will or won't accept of their husband. They can choose if that's what it is that they deserve or not. A child cannot choose their parents. A child cannot choose what to accept or not accept. They can't say this is less than I deserve. As a child, they may feel it, but they don't always have a choice as far as what they get and what they experience or what they are subjected to. And so what is most disturbing to me about Cody's behavior is how toxic and emotionally abusive he is with the kids. And when he does stuff like distance himself or stop contact, that isn't fair to the child who just deserves their father there with 100% investment, loving them unconditionally, regardless of the state of his relationship with the mom. They didn't sign up to be manipulated or abused. They didn't sign up to walk on eggshells. And it's not appropriate either for kids. And I wonder how much of that all of the kids had to do. It's not fair to kids to be loved differently, loved conditionally, or treated differently, or not seen at all by a father just because that father resents their mother. It's all very fucked up. So Christine did not poison the well. If Cody's kids aren't crazy about him, it's because of Cody and his own behavior. And Cody needs to take accountability for that with his kids. If he wants a relationship with them, he has to do the work. And disrespecting the mother of his kids, treating her as less than, deflecting, and refusing to take accountability with her on television isn't going to help his case if Cody really cares to have a good relationship with his kids, in my opinion. Cody says grown-ups make it work for the kids. I don't think Cody's kids want to be around Cody's toxicity. He may want to see them, but do they want to see him when he behaves like this? Next, Cody tells Christine he doesn't have to be her lover to be a good parent to their children. He hasn't been a good parent. There isn't even the possibility of that when Cody refused to go to Isabel's surgery. The idea that Cody could ever be a good parent was tossed out of the window by him. Cody tells Christine the idea of her moving doesn't work for him. Cody says that Mitch and Aspen and Tony and Peyton and McKelty want to be around them. They want to be around them. And that's the reason they have gone out of town all of the time. Cody tells Christine, okay, and then he tries to deflect onto COVID. He says, this is what happens. This is the cycle of what happens with COVID. He says, in this family, we don't know what this is, but we are going to abide by these rules as a family, the COVID protocols. He says Christine and Janelle and their children have different views of that. And Cody says because he has got to maintain a certain level of the COVID rules, but nobody else does it, it's easy to point the finger from everybody that dad is doing something wrong. Christine says before COVID ever hit, Cody wants Christine to stop talking. He reaches out to touch her elbows and he cuts her off. He tells her, sorry, this one's not going to work with me, before she even finishes her thought. And Christine says it does work. And Cody ignores her and he goes on that it won't work because they tried this. And Christine asks Cody, do you know what I learned during COVID? That I can do it alone. That I can do it without you. Christine says she didn't know that she could. Cody looks dumbfounded. And I've used that word a lot today. It's the best expression that he and Robyn get in this situation. They are malfunctioning. They don't know what to do. Cody puts up his hands and he says, you know what? He tells Christine he is so effing mad about this that he is just going to put it aside and let this go. Cody tells Christine if she is going to take the kids and leave, he asks, does that mean that the family is no more? Christine says she knows that her being here feels like they aren't part of the family anyways, even when she's in Flagstaff. Christine says she knows that being here, she isn't important to him. She doesn't feel important to him. Cody tells Christine that being here during COVID, it was hard on everybody. Cody says Christine was making a decision. And Christine interrupts Cody. She makes it clear it's not about COVID. And Cody says, yes, it is. And Christine says, no, it's not about COVID. And she is getting frustrated because she has done years of this marriage and worked hard. This started way before COVID. And Cody wants to deflect and try and put the blame now on COVID making her make this decision. Christine explains to Cody that he hasn't been around for years. She asks him, what are you talking about? And Cody frustratedly asks her, what are you talking about? He says he is here every third night or every sixth night, whatever it happens to be. Cody is gesturing, pointing fingers. He says, yes, I am here. You can't say that I'm not, as he aggressively points his finger at Christine. In confessional, Cody says she hasn't been mistreated. There is no victim here. She has lost her faith, her religion, her direction, and now she is wanting out of this marriage. Obviously, that isn't true. Cody just wants to deflect on anything he can. Christine is a warrior. She is no victim. But Cody did mistreat her big time. And she is a victim of his abuse and manipulations and toxicity, or she was, for over 25 years. And she tried very hard to make this work. And Cody did mistreat her big time. He tried to manipulate her, leveraging sex with his own wife as a way to modify her behavior with her sister wife, Robyn. That's sick and cruel and abusive. Cody refused to show up to Isabel's surgery to help support Christine with the caretaking and to be with Isabel during her recovery, just to punish her because he and Christine had a rocky relationship and he was unhappy with her and he wasn't willing to inconvenience himself. That is neglect. And it was incredibly emotionally abusive of Cody to do that to his daughter. He abandoned her emotionally, physically, and mentally when she needed him the most. And he abandoned Christine emotionally and physically a long time ago. Just the way Cody talks with Christine here and over the years shows how abusive and toxic and manipulative Cody can be. So when he says she is no victim, she lost her faith, blaming Christine, trying to take the focus off of himself and his own accountability, we obviously know he wants to paint a narrative that this is Christine's fault. He did nothing wrong as a husband. He did nothing wrong as a father. Cody really is the juice at the bottom of the trash bag. He's one sick fuck, and he is a low vibration person who will never change, in my opinion. And the best thing Christine ever did was free herself from him. I don't think he's well, in my opinion. I think he's very far gone to behave in this way and to treat someone who spent 25 years of her life with him and gave him 6 kids. The way he's treating her in this conversation, he doesn't see her as his equal, and that's really disgusting. And then for him to say that there has been no mistreatment, this guy needs to go get fucked. But since he hates having sex with his wives, maybe it just doesn't work for him. I've never seen a man who has such an aversion to sex. It's very odd, especially for an alpha male. When Cody says that Christine has lost her faith and her direction, he is projecting how he feels about himself, in my opinion, because Cody has lost his way. And Cody obviously lost his faith years ago when he couldn't even do the basics that the faith require for the lifestyle, which is at least to do everything fair and equal across the board for all the wives. Cody tells Christine angrily that she is going on a singular memory of what has happened for the past 10 months while he kept the rules and she broke them. So basically he's saying that she is basing wanting a divorce over the 9 months of COVID or the 10 months of COVID, that she's not considering the whole relationship, when basically the whole relationship she probably felt she was married to a wall. He seemed to give almost nothing as far as effort. Cody says it makes him look like the bad guy to his kids. He knows because he says, guess what? His adult children are coming after him too, and saying that he's neglecting everybody. And Cody is trying to explain to them that he wasn't neglecting everybody, that those who were being neglected were breaking the rules and making it so he couldn't do his job. Cody, of course, is still in deflection mode, but listen, Cody made the choice to make protocols and say bend the knee unquestioningly, or I won't be here for what I signed up for as a father and a husband. Cody is basically saying, me being right, me getting my ego boost matters more than me doing my job as a father and a husband. Cody made that choice, that it was all or nothing, not his wives and not his kids. So Cody showed them that they don't matter, that him wanting to be right, that him wanting power, that him needing to stroke his ego was more important than him being there for his family. And Cody's wives and his kids followed CDC guidelines to the best of their ability, and they were willing to compromise. Cody was not. It was all or nothing. So Cody was neglectful, and at a time when his wives and kids needed him the most, he was on a power trip, only looking to coddle his ego. He could do his job. He could have compromised with his wives and kids and come up with something everyone could more or less agree to. Cody refused, and his wives and kids refused to bend the knee. No self-respecting person would have agreed to be controlled or dictated to in that way. And that would not be a good lesson for the wives to teach their kids, to submit and blindly obey unquestioningly. Obeying Cody, by the way, isn't loyalty and respect. That would just be enabling him and his descent into madness and being a yes man to help facilitate this bad behavior. When you don't agree, isn't a good lesson to teach your kids. And it's also impossible to be held hostage in your own home for threat of an illness you may or may not get that you can take precautions against that most people survive. So it wasn't a reasonable ask If Cody wanted to decide to be all or nothing, if he wanted to decide to not do his job as a father and a husband, that's his choice. It was not the fault of the wives and the kids who refused the demands of a dictator trying to force their hand by leveraging their absence as a father and a husband. Should they not submit? This is all on Cody and his choices. This is not at all on his wives or his kids. If everyone in your life has a problem having a functional relationship with you, and all of your kids and all of your wives have trouble getting along with you, there is a reason, there is a common thread. And the problem is usually you. The problem is Cody and his behavior and his character, not his wives and not his kids coming after him to burn him at the stake. Cody knows the truth, but because his ego can't handle it, he has to come up with a different narrative that he is the victim being blamed and attacked. Remember all season long when Cody blamed his wives and kids for not following the rules, and he shamed them and he punished them and he attacked them every chance he got. Remember when he stopped calling his kids and coming around almost as punishment to try and force them to bend the knee so his ego could be restored? And when they refused, how Cody called them obstacles to his goals in life because they were now an inconvenience and they were now in direct contradiction of how Cody perceives himself. They were critical of his demands. They were letting him know he was doing something wrong. And in Cody's eyes, he can do no wrong. He must be obeyed. He's the leader. And so his ego couldn't take it. And maybe Cody is such a vile, negative energy vampire, such an asshole with narcissistic tendencies, sucking everyone dry in his delusions with his warped state of mind, that now no one wants to be around Cody. No one is attacking Cody. No one is burning Cody at the stake. Cody and Cody alone got himself in this position. And if Cody wants better relationships, if he wants to learn to be a decent human and a decent father and a decent husband, and he wants to try and rebuild his relationships, he needs to probably hit rock bottom. He needs to check his ego at the door. And maybe, perhaps, allegedly, he could go get some help. In my opinion, a guy like Cody with this personality type won't ever change. He will burn every bridge he has. I don't know if a therapist can teach him how to love unconditionally or how to understand how his behavior affects others. I don't know if he can be taught to understand others' emotions free from his own ego, or if he can learn to take true accountability. I think it's just a part of character that Cody doesn't have within him. But maybe at this point, if everyone around Cody can't have a functional relationship with him, he needs to realize he has some kind of problem and he needs to try and see about it. I don't even know if help will help people like this. I doubt it, but I would say trying is less pathetic than not trying. Cody wants to deflect and make this about COVID, as if Christine is being short-sighted, when we know damn well maybe the way Cody handled COVID exacerbated this, but she was very unhappy for years trying to make this work with no effort at all from Cody. This was a very one-sided marriage. She couldn't do it, and it's not just about COVID, and that's very insulting of Cody to suggest that Christine is being short-sighted or that this is only about COVID. Cody wants to make it about Cody. He wants to deflect from taking accountability because he doesn't know what else to do or say. Cody tells Christine they won't be able to convince each other about their past. He says actually Christine has convinced him about their past, and he's tired of saying plural marriage sucks because he has people that he knows who live plural marriage well, who are very happy. Cody tells Christine he is afraid of her taking Truly and going to Utah, the most unfriendly state for polygamy in the union. And he thinks Christine will get a boyfriend who wants some of their money, and then between Christine and her hypothetical boyfriend that she gets and the state of Utah, Cody is worried that he will lose any access to Truly and all of his money because he has seen that happen to many people. Christine asks, so that's your biggest fear? After all this, Cody's main fucking concern after 25 years of marriage isn't his children's feelings or his wife's feelings or the rest of the family's feelings. It's money. What a fucking dick. Cody says his biggest fear is Utah, a greedy boyfriend, a user, a greedy new husband. He says user again. He seems to be very concerned that Christine would pick some fucking idiot to be with, a user, after she's already gone through all this. Cody really is underestimating Christine's intelligence, and it's very fucking insulting. Why would Christine need a husband or a boyfriend in order to be happy? She just got free. Probably the last thing I would want if I had to experience what she went through and I was now free, the last thing I would ever want on earth at that moment would be a man. I would chill with my kids and heal and adjust to life. And if I found someone rad, amazing. If not, oh well, it would never really even be my priority. And I don't think it's Christine's priority to have a man. Why does Robyn assumed last tell-all that she would have a husband and now Cody's talking about her having a man? What if she just wanted to be single? Is a woman worthless if she's single and has kids? Why couldn't she be single and love her life and enjoy it with her kids? Why is it a problem and why is it assumed that she would have a man to be happy? Maybe she's going to have a really hot boyfriend who's really enthusiastic about banging her. And if she wants that, great. And if she's happy with that, more power to her. I don't understand what Cody's deal is. Why can't she just be happy with her kids? Why is he assuming all these things? He's always doom and gloom. Cody keeps talking about money, and I doubt he has millions. And if he did, he got it off of the backs of his wives parading them for show and off of his kids while treating them like trash behind closed doors. So it's not even money I'd want. If I was Christine, I would just be like, I don't even give a fuck. I just want to get out of here. Christine is going to be very successful, and I'd love to see a show about her rebuilding her life with Janelle sprinkled in there as well. There is way too much toxicity with Cody, and it's not fun to watch him degrade Christine and treat her like she is less than. He treats her like she is slow almost with the way he speaks to her when she is very intelligent. And I think he is threatened by her positive energy and her intellect and her inner strength big time because he's a very insecure man. Cody wants Christine to promise him that her phantom husband will never try to take his money. Christine has integrity. I can tell, no matter how shitty Kotex is, because she loves Janelle, because she loves the kids, even if she had poor character, which she doesn't, she would never try to take his money. She has a heart of gold and she has a lot of integrity. She would not be gullible or naive enough to marry the wrong man again. She was like 19 when she got married. She didn't even know herself. She didn't even know the world. She didn't even realize what she was getting into probably. So I doubt she would ever make that mistake again of marrying the wrong person. And if she remarries, it's going to be to a real man who will have his own money. And Christine has her own money. She's not a nitwit. And they're not going to want to touch a penny of Cody's money. No one wants anything to do with him. And this is so insulting to Christine to make her promise. She has much higher morals and a better conscience and a much better soul than Cody does. And she has a very good soul. Cody is the one that is questionable, in my opinion, not Christine. And he's making her promise. And she promises it's not going to happen. After 25 years of marriage, you would think he wouldn't need to ask her for that promise. You would think that he would know that. This whole thing is so cringe and it's so difficult to watch and it's so disturbing. It's so insulting to Christine to treat her this way. I can't even believe it. In confessional, Christine says everything Cody is saying and how he is behaving is confirming her decision. She says she made the right decision and she says he is not safe for me. She shudders and again she says he is not safe for her and there is no doubt in her mind that she has chosen correctly here. She's free. She's free now. She is probably going to feel like this is the best decision she ever made in her whole entire life. Christine tells Cody that living plural marriage has been an effort. There's been no joy. And Cody tells Christine she is excited about this. He can tell she's excited about getting out. And Christine says she is heartbroken about getting out, but she can't live in that heartbroken spot. Cody tells her that he just saw a glint in her eye. She's excited about getting out, and he can see it. Who wouldn't be? Viewers are so happy for Christine. I am so happy for Christine. They want her to be free of Cody and his toxicity. She is too good for him. Christine tells Cody that she is excited about the hope for the future, but she looks at this as being very hard. And Cody says it's been worse for Mary. He tells Christine that she and him have had way more romance than he and Mary have had in 5 years. Christine tells Cody she would never ever want what he and Mary have, and she would never want to have what she has with Cody, nor does she want Mary to have that type of relationship with him. Christine says no way. She tells Cody that's hard, that's so heartbreaking. And she says in confessional that she gets so frustrated when Cody is like, yeah, but Mary is doing this and she's fine. And Christine wonders, why is Cody comparing her marriage to him with his marriage to Mary? Christine asks, why don't we compare your marriage with Robyn with my marriage with you? Why don't we compare that? Exactly. Very well said. Christine tells Cody it's been so hard to talk about plural marriage, to talk about sister wives. It's been so heartbreaking and so hard being your wife, where she feels like she doesn't matter and she is not important. She tells Cody he has so many other places he would rather be. She asks, did I ever bring up the Mother's Day where you came over for 15? Then she says, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Christine says, our memories are different. It's fine. She tells Cody his time is his time. She tells him, do whatever you want with it. Cody tells Christine, come on. I see my stuff moved out. He says he has been defensive ever since he has seen that. Cody is always on the defensive with anyone in his family who he knows will not blindly comply, who might be an inconvenience to him, who doesn't praise him like the sun shines out of his ass 24/7. And if you give the guy any constructive criticism, he takes it as disrespect, disloyalty, and an insult because his ego just can't take it. So Cody wasn't on the defensive just because of the boxes. Cody is on the defensive 24/7 with anyone in his life who isn't Robyn and her kids, because everyone who isn't Robyn and her kids are Cody's opponents to him. Christine tells Cody it was heartbreaking being your wife, as Cody covers his face with his hand. She says it's been heartbreaking being your wife for years. She says, it has been heartbreaking. When I asked you for help, and I still ask you for help, I ask you to be a partner. I ask you to be here, and you are not. You're not. And she tells Cody, I don't care what you say. And Cody says he sees it as if it's never enough. Christine tells him, you are not here. And she says when Cody is there, he is not involved. She says it doesn't matter, and she starts to cry. And Cody says he doesn't know how she can see that. He says he comes, he tries to engage the kids all the time. He says he tries to play with them. Christine says when she was important to him, when she mattered to him, it was easy to live plural marriage. It was fine. But now all she gets is a constant reminder every time she sees him. Every time there is a family get together, every single time she tells Cody, I see you being this amazing husband, this amazing dad who cares, who helps in the home, who spends so much time because the kids are so secure with you and they are 100% great with you. because you have given them the opportunity to be there with them. Christine tells Cody she sees it and she wants it. And Cody tells Christine not to compare relationships. And she says she isn't comparing relationships. And Cody tells her, yes, she is. Christine tells Cody when they get together, and Cody cuts her off. And he says, this is the poison that she has been putting in plural marriage for 12 years. Christine asks, I don't know what I did wrong. She asks, what did I do wrong that you wouldn't help me all the times that I have asked you? And Cody says he felt like he was here. He felt like he was dealing with somebody who was constantly agitated. He felt like he was with somebody where there was a constant discomfort. So if he seemed detached when he was here, it was because, and Christine cuts Cody off. She says, because I didn't know how to properly respond to heartbreak. She says that's what this is, because her heart has been broken enough. Cody then states the obvious. He says, so for us, plural marriage doesn't work. And Christine responds, for us, marriage doesn't work. Christine says she feels like to Cody, Robyn is more important than she is. And she has been a third wheel for years now. And she knows it, and everybody knows it, and it's sad, and it sucks. But her relationship with Cody isn't as important. It's not. She says, no matter what, Cody says, it's not. She says the sun doesn't rise and set on her. It doesn't, but nor has it ever really. Cody tells Christine she has just decided to move on, and he is sitting here going, all right. Christine asks Cody, why would you want me to stay? And Cody shrugs and he says, because I am supposed to. Christine tells him, you don't want to. You don't really want to. And Cody just says, I'm sorry. And Christine says she is sorry too. And Cody says, we can't make ourselves into something that we don't want to be, because he thinks that they tried doing that for years now. And then the episode ends. See what a coward Cody is? I seriously believe that this guy wants to live monogamously with Robyn, but he knows he can't. He can't divorce his wives. I think some part of him is worried about his salvation, so he won't be the one to leave his wives, and he doesn't want to look like the asshole. So he withdraws intimacy, he abuses, he manipulates to try and push all of his wives to want to leave him. Then it's not him making the decision to call it quits. He calls his family an obstacle to his goals in life, an obstacle to monogamy with Robyn, in my opinion. And Cody would rather hurt and abuse and manipulate and damage every member of his family to push them away, rather than being a man and sitting down and explaining that he is miserable, he can't do this anymore, that he will do all he can financially to support his wives, but that they are free. That would have more respect and dignity and much less hurt than Cody doing things this way. And I have a feeling this season, Cody will target Janelle next with the exact same playbook he used on Mary and Christine. And the COVID protocols, in my opinion, were exactly what I thought all along. A way for Cody to try and justify not fulfilling his obligations, not being there as a father and a husband for all of his wives and kids. He saw COVID, in my opinion, as an opportunity to have a way to free himself and to live monogamy. I don't think it was about COVID. I don't think it was about his fear or protecting the family. If it was about protecting the family and he cared about his kids dying, he would have gone and been with Isabel. I think Cody wanted to use it to try and see if he could gain some power back. And if not, he wanted to push those who would not fall in line away by not being present, taking the coward's way out. Cody's rules and his all or nothing attitude did more damage in the family than COVID ever could. And in my opinion, he did it intentionally at a time when it was on him to hold up his end of the deal, to be a good father and a good husband during the scariest time for the world. This is what Cody signed up for, but he didn't uphold his end of the deal for his kids or his wives during a very uncertain time, intentionally, so he can try and manage to get what he wanted out of the situation, which I believe is monogamy with Robyn. Cody talks a lot about loyalty and about respect, but when the shit hits the fan, when his wives and kids are needing him the most, Cody has no fucks to give. He has not a shred of loyalty or respect for the kids he made with his wives or for the mothers of his children. Yet he expects blind obedience that he dresses up as what he perceives to be respect and loyalty. He expects a one-way street where his supplicants bend backwards to prove they respect him, to prove they are loyal, where they will bend the knee and jump through hoops to show just how obedient they really are. But Cody has not a shred of unconditional love or loyalty to give anyone in his family. They are his obstacles after all. That's it for this episode. To my YouTube viewers, please like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments section if you like. I'll be back this week with another episode of Book Club on Chapter 11 on Christine, and also for the next episode of Sister Wives, Season 17, Episode 2, Is There a Favorite Wife? Thanks for listening. See you soon. Bye.